Not only dumped, but also lost her Michelin-starred restaurant to her anonymous manipulative ex-boyfriend. Our protagonist Arya worked day and night to create her exclusive recipe, but unexpectedly, right before her wedding, she was dumped and kicked out to work as a hired maid. But 3 years later, she made a sensational comeback alongside the mafia boss Adrian Voss. Not only did they expose the NYC scammer who stole intellectual property at the $40 million conference on but they also unmasked the fraudulent intellectual property thief. And the gang leader even uncovered the mafia network that had murdered her parents 5 years earlier, using oneself as bait for the assassin. This kind of revenge is so captivating, you won't even need to think twice.
Vengeance is conventionally a cold-served reprisal. But for the subject, Arya Bennett, witnessing her former fiancé seize her life's work, her establishment, her culinary creations, her entire career, she discovered some betrayals incinerate the psyche, leaving only ash. 3 years post-trauma, she's an anonymous figure at a lavish gala serving patrons who have erased her from memory. Then she identifies him, Daniel Cross, now wealthier beyond reproach and poised to dismantle her once more. Yet this night presents a new variable. She is not isolated. The man at her side does not pardon, he does not forget, he eradicates. Follow this case study to its conclusion, engage with the like button, and log your city to track this narrative's reach. The Luminance Event Kitchen was permeated with the aroma of rosemary and psychological collapse. Arya Bennett stood at a prep station, her movements dictated by autonomic memory as she assembled canapes priced higher than her weekly living expenses. Goat cheese, fig reduction, a sprig of thyme, positioned with clinical precision, fabricated perfection on miniature plates. She had ceased to taste her own food 2 years prior. Arya, we require those hors d'oeuvres in 5 minutes. Marcus, the event manager, appeared at the service entrance. Perspiration beaded on his brow despite the climate control. The clientele is arriving, and Mr. Voss demands absolute perfection. When does he not? She remained focused downward, her hands plated with the meticulousness of an individual who once possessed ambition, who once held the belief that talent superseded social capital. That was pre-Daniel. Marcus paused. Look, regarding tonight, I'm aware, she interrupted him, her tone devoid of emotion. A major event, influential attendees. Avoid any errors. That is not what He broke off, exhaling. Forget it. Just remain vigilant out there. The caution registered as a minor irritant, which she dismissed. Marcus's chronic anxiety was a professional trait. Her role was to create food for social media documentation and subsequent oblivion. She took the tray and proceeded to the service lift. The Kirill Hotel's grand ballroom presented as a form of weaponized opulence. Crystal fixtures shed light upon marble flooring. Ice sculptures wept onto tables draped in cream-colored silk. Women in gowns valued more than automobiles feigned amusement at humorless remarks, while men in tuxedos brokered deals that would precipitate ruin by morning. Arya had adapted to navigate these environments like a phantom. Unseen, methodical, secure, she was midway to a serving point when she processed the name. Daniel Cross just made his entrance with Senator Morrison's daughter. The tray registered a slight tremor, just enough to displace a canapé, 1/2 inch. No. I understand he's launching his 3rd establishment next month. The New York Times had labeled him a culinary visionary. Visionary! The term tasted like bile in her mouth. Arya stabilized her hand and continued her trajectory. She placed the tray, turned to retreat to the kitchen, and it was then she saw him. Daniel Cross was positioned near the entryway, framed by the aura of his success. His features had always been sharp, a defined jaw, dark eyes, a smile that engendered premature trust. But 3 years had honed him into a more formidable subject. Refined, dominant, inviolable. The woman on his arm appeared no older than 25, a composite of blonde hair and cultivated poise. She laughed at his words, and Arya recalled a similar laughter before she understood the true value of his commitments. Her chest constricted, the room began to feel unstable. She pivoted toward the service corridor, but her limbs ceased to respond to neural commands. She remained immobile, frozen within the glittering assembly, observing the man who had appropriated her life pass by, as if she were non-existent, because to him she was. Miss Bennet. The voice originated behind her, low and controlled. It was a voice that did not request focus, but seized it. Arya turned. Adrian Voss stood 3 feet away, holding a glass of scotch he had yet to drink. He was tall, approximately 6'2", with dark hair brushed back from a face of classical structure, high cheekbones, and gray eyes that perceived everything. His suit's value likely equaled her former 6-month salary. He was technically her employer. Luminance Events was one of 12 enterprises he controlled, and she had seen him perhaps 3 times in 2 years. In each instance, he observed her with the same disquieting focus he displayed now. Mr. Voss. She attempted a professional, stable tone as if her psychological foundation were not fracturing. Is there an issue with the catering? No. He moved a step nearer. But there is an issue with you. I am fine. You are not. His eyes shifted past her, toward Daniel. You have a history with him. It was a statement, not an inquiry. Arya's throat tightened. I must return to the kitchen. You will remain. Why? The word emerged with more force than she intended. So I can observe him revel in the theft of my entire career? No, thank you. Adrian's facial expression was static, but his eyes revealed a shift. Perhaps recognition or strategic analysis. He didn't just take your restaurant, correct? She emitted a laugh. It sounded fractured. You have conducted your research. I am always prepared. He placed his scotch on a passing server's tray. 3 years ago, you were Michelin's emerging talent, a top graduate of the Culinary Institute. Betrothed to Daniel Cross, the two of you co-developed the menu that became the core of Ember, the very restaurant that made him renowned. Stop. You signed the business documentation over to him as an act of trust, of love. And 2 weeks preceding the official opening, he terminated the engagement, retained the restaurant, and systematically expunged your name from its history. I said stop. Adrian inclined his head. He appropriated your recipes, your concept, your career, and when you attempted legal recourse, his family's attorneys buried you so thoroughly, no credible establishment would employ you. Consequently, you vanished into event catering, where personal histories are not scrutinized. Arya's hands formed fists. What is the purpose of this? Because tonight his agenda is to humiliate you further. The ambient temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. What? Adrian indicated the far side of the ballroom. Observe the journalist from Taste magazine. Daniel invited her here to document his attendance, and he ensured she was aware you are employed here as low-wage catering staff. Arya's vision began to lose focus. You're fabricating this? I do not fabricate. I strategize. He produced a phone, activated the screen, and presented it to her. It was an email from Daniel's publicist to the reporter. The subject line read, Story angle. From partner to service staff. She processed the first sentence and her breathing ceased. Thought you would appreciate the irony. My ex-fiancée, Arya Bennett, will be serving appetizers at tonight's gala. The woman who believed she could build Ember without me is now The text dissolved into sensory static. "He will make a public comment tonight," Adrian continued calmly, "on how success demands more than mere talent, on how some are destined to lead, while others are destined to serve. The reporter will find it irresistible. By tomorrow, your name will be a mockery on every food blog between here and San Francisco." Arya was paralyzed, incapable of thought. 3 years spent reconstructing her life from ruin, and he intended to shatter it again simply because he possessed the power to do so. "Why are you disclosing this to me?" Her voice was raw. Adrian remained silent for a considerable moment. When he replied, his tone held an element she had not detected before, something that felt almost personal. "Because I understand the experience of being erased by someone you trusted, and because I am presenting you with a choice." "What choice?" "You can depart immediately, return home, allow him another victory." He paused. "Or you can remain. Allow me to manage the situation. Let me demonstrate the consequences when someone finally initiates a counterattack. You don't know me. I know what is sufficient." His gray eyes locked with hers. "I know you dedicated 6 months to creating a signature dish, merging French methods with Korean profiles. I know Daniel presented it at Ember's debut without crediting you. I know it earned him his first Michelin star. And I know that with every day you labor in that kitchen, a part of you atrophies." The precision of his analysis was more painful than the memories themselves. "What is your price?" Arya inquired. "Because men like Adrian Voss do not provide assistance without expecting reciprocation. Your trust." He stated it with simplicity. "For tonight. That is all. That is never all. It is never just that." A flicker of something like respect registered on his face. "You are correct. It is not. The remainder is subject to future negotiation. At present, you must decide. Do you seek justice, or do you prefer to continue hiding?" Across the ballroom, Daniel laughed. The sound was confident, cruel. The reporter leaned closer, her notebook poised. Arya recalled the restaurant she had envisioned since she was 16. The recipes she had honed over innumerable sleepless nights. The moment of signing those documents, placing her faith in the man she loved to construct their shared future. She considered 3 years of quietude, of diminishing herself, of feigning indifference. Then, a part of her psyche she had actively suppressed finally fractured. "What do you require of me?" Adrian's smile was chillingly perfect. "Nothing. Simply remain by my side. And when the event occurs, do not flee. When what event occurs, you will know." He extended his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Arya accepted it. As they moved through the crowd, she perceived an immediate shift in the social dynamics. People registered Adrian's presence. They always did. But this evening, with her beside him, that focus intensified. Speculation trailed them. "Is that not the catering staff? Why is she with Adrian Voss? Are they attending together?" Arya's face flushed, but Adrian's grip on her arm increased just enough to ground her. The subjects positioned themselves for optimal visibility at the room's epicenter. The perpetrator, Daniel, took notice. The subject, Arya, observed his predictable cognitive sequence: surprise, confusion, and finally a predatory calculation. He disengaged from his companion and approached with the assurance of an individual with no history of significant loss. "Arya." His smile was a dental display. "Wow, I almost didn't recognize you. You look..." "You?" He performed a theatrical scan of her attire, a simple black dress, starkly different from the designer gowns present. "Well, You look exactly like what you are. The subject's previous psychological profile would have fractured under this stimulus. A past iteration would have apologized for occupying his vicinity. This new subject, recently empowered by the asset Adrian, returned the smile. Daniel still compensating for mediocre talent with expensive suits. A tightening of his jaw musculature was observed. Still bitter, I see. Not bitter, just honest. She registered Adrian's proximity as a protective buffer. How's the restaurant? Still serving my recipes? Our recipes? He postured, attempting to retroactively alter the narrative. You seem to forget. We built Ember together. No, I built it. You just learned how to sign your name on my work. A dermal vasodilation appeared on his cheeks as a reporter, sensing conflict, drew nearer. You signed the contracts, Arya. You gave me that restaurant because you knew you couldn't handle it. Too much pressure, too much responsibility. He elevated his vocal projection for the benefit of nearby observers. Some people are creators, others are maintainers. You were always better at following recipes than leading kitchens. The words were delivered as targeted psychological blows. Bystanders feigned inattention while absorbing each syllable. The subject experienced a surge of aggression. Before she could react, Adrian interjected. Interesting theory. His voice cut through the ambient tension with clinical precision. Tell me, Cross, is that why you've been hiring consultants to redesign Ember's menu? Because the original creator can't help you anymore? Daniel's smile became fixed. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Adrian produced a mobile device and presented the screen to Daniel. These invoices suggest otherwise. 3 different consulting firms in 2 years, all trying to recapture whatever magic made Ember successful in the first place. The perpetrator's face lost significant coloration. Where did you? Those are private financial records. Nothing's private if you know where to look. Adrian's tone remained flat, factual, and psychologically devastating. You see, I've been considering investing in Ember. Due diligence is thorough, and what I found was illuminating. The reporter's notation speed increased. Daniel's voice dropped to a sibilant whisper. You have no right. I have every right. I'm a potential investor, Adrian replied with a smile. The expression did not engage his orbital muscles. Although, based on what I've learned, I think I'll pass. Restaurants built on stolen foundations tend to collapse. It's only a matter of time. You bastard! Careful. The single weighted word terminated Daniel's verbal escalation. You're already one viral moment away from losing your 3rd location's investors. I'd hate for someone to leak those consultant contracts to, say, Taste Magazine. I imagine their readers would find it fascinating that the culinary genius can't actually create new dishes without expensive help. A vacuum of silence formed around them. Daniel's gaze locked on Arya, and for the first time in 3 years, she observed an emotion other than smugness in his eyes. Fear. This isn't over, he stated quietly. You're right, Adrian confirmed. It's not. He then initiated an unexpected physical maneuver. He kissed her. The act was not gentle but possessive. He secured her, one hand on her lumbar spine, the other cupping her jaw, claiming her publicly before the very audience that had witnessed her social decline. The subject's cognition temporarily ceased before entering a state of hyperarousal. She reciprocated the action, a response likely stemming from shock, the catharsis of 3 years of suppressed rage. or the tactile reinforcement of being defended. When they separated, the ballroom was utterly silent. Daniel remained immobilized, his expression a tableau of humiliation and fury. The reporter appeared professionally ecstatic. Adrian, however, observed Arya as though he had just secured an invaluable asset. "Shall we dance?" he inquired softly. Arya nodded, vocally incapacitated. He led her to the dance floor for a waltz. His hand rested on her waist, hers on his shoulder. They moved in a synchronized fashion that suggested long practice. "You kissed me," she finally articulated. "I did." "Why?" "Because he needed to understand that you're not his to diminish anymore." Adrian's gray eyes held her gaze. "And because you needed to remember what it feels like to be someone's priority instead of their punchline." "I didn't ask for that." "I know." They turned, and she witnessed Daniel's rapid egress from the venue. The reporter was already transmitting data, likely filing the story that would define the next news cycle. "You destroyed him," Arya said softly. "No, I exposed him. There's a difference," Adrian corrected, pulling her closer. "Destroying him comes later." A change in his tone prompted her to look up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means tonight was just the opening move. Arya, if you want real justice, if you want everything he took from you, this is only the beginning." "I don't understand." "You will." The waltz concluded. Adrian stepped away, but retained his grip on her hand. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office downtown, and I'll show you exactly what happens when someone finally fights back properly." "Why would I trust you?" "You shouldn't." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture coded as romantic but functioning as a behavioral anchor. "But you will anyway because you're tired of being afraid, and because somewhere underneath all that carefully maintained invisibility, you're still the woman who is going to revolutionize American cuisine." He released her. "10 a.m., Arya, don't be late." He then receded into the crowd. Arya stood on the dance floor, experiencing tachycardia and cognitive chaos. The gala continued around her, a mass display of the bystander effect. She touched her lips. They retained a tactile memory. Her phone vibrated, a communication from an associate named Marcus. "What the hell just happened? Everyone's talking about you." Another vibration, an unknown number. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The address is attached. AV." Her protocol should have been to retreat, to erase the night's events, to classify Adrian Voss as a superior threat to Daniel. However, 3 years of self-imposed catatonia had rendered her susceptible. Tonight, for the first time since Daniel's psychological assault, she felt neurologically stimulated. Arya surveyed the city lights. Out there, Daniel was likely initiating legal countermeasures. Good. She hoped he was experiencing terror. She hoped his sleep cycle was disrupted. She hoped he now understood the sensation of a public unraveling. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Adrian. "You did well tonight. Get some rest. Tomorrow things get interesting." Arya produced a laugh-like vocalization. It sounded almost authentic. She deleted the message and proceeded to the service elevator. Before entering, she took one final survey of the ballroom, the ecosystem that had rejected her. And she smiled because tomorrow she would be walking into Adrian Voss's office. Whatever waited there, danger, manipulation, revenge, was preferable to the slow decay of her current existence. She had been a non-entity for 3 years. It was time to become a hostile presence. The elevator doors closed and Arya Bennett descended, her future now in the possession of a man whose kiss was a declaration of war. Fear should have been the dominant emotion. Instead, she felt only anticipation for the next day. End of observation. The subject's apartment was a small, forgettable unit of 1,200 square feet, a testament to the financial outcome of her previous conflict. She dropped her keys onto a counter in the darkness. Her phone's vibrations were incessant. Communications from individuals who had vanished after Daniel's lawyers issued legal warnings now resurfaced. They requested data, gossip, confirmation. OMG, is it true you're dating Adrian Voss? I saw the video. You looked amazing. Girl, please tell me you're taking Daniel down. Video evidence of the event was now a known factor. Arya bypassed them all, opening her email. The first message induced a visceral response. Subject: interview request, Taste magazine. She deleted it. The second was a legal notice from Cross Enterprises. Her hand trembled while opening the document. The legalese was dense, the tone menacing, but the objective was unmistakable. Any further public statements against Daniel Cross or Ember Restaurant would trigger immediate litigation. The communication cited the evening's events and warned against additional claims regarding the establishment's conceptual origins. A laugh escaped Arya, harsh and acrid. He was exhibiting fear. She dismissed the email and examined the attached file. Adrian had provided a downtown address, the Voss Building, 60 stories of steel and glass, a monolith against the skyline. Intimidation was the expected response. Instead, she registered an unfamiliar hunger. Not for sustenance. That sensation had been absent for years. This was a sharper, more primal drive. It was the kind of impetus that arises from discerning a clear path after years of stasis. Her phone vibrated. Unidentified caller, she nearly declined. An instinct, however, compelled her to accept. Arya Bennett. A female voice, professional, devoid of warmth. Who is this? Catherine Wu. I represent Daniel Cross and Ember Restaurant. I am calling to strongly advise you. Allow me to interrupt. Arya's voice was firmer than she anticipated. You're calling to intimidate me, to inform me that if I persist in discussing Ember, I'll be buried under legal expenses I cannot sustain. Is that an accurate summary? A pause on the line, then, Miss Bennett, I recognize you're distressed regarding the termination of your relationship with Mr. Cross. My relationship? Do you mean the business partnership where I formulated every recipe, conceived the entire brand, and signed away my rights because I was naive enough to trust him? The contracts don't reflect that because he drafted them after our engagement, after I had already surrendered everything. Miss Bennett, relay a message to Daniel for me. Arya moved to the window, observing the city. Tell him my period of silence is over. Inform him that the next time he plans my public humiliation, he should be reminded that I am no longer isolated. And convey that Adrian Voss doesn't issue threats. He executes maneuvers. Tonight was merely the overture. She terminated the call. Her hands were now visibly shaking. Adrenaline, anxiety, and a third, unidentifiable emotion surged through her. The phone rang again instantly. A different number. She let it proceed to voicemail. Then she did something she had forbidden herself for 3 years. She accessed her closet, retrieved a box from the top shelf, and unsealed it. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, her foundational recipes, her design sketches, her aspirations in ink. The complete menu for Ember was there. Every dish she had engineered, every method she had perfected, her entire vision for what the restaurant was meant to be. They had remained hidden, a source of acute psychological pain. Now she scanned the pages with clinical detachment, reading, recalling, and cataloging the precise extent of Daniel's theft. Ember's renowned dish, the one that secured his Michelin star, was documented on page 47. Korean short rib with a gochujang glaze, crisp rice cakes, and pickled daikon. She had invested 6 months refining that equilibrium. Daniel presented it on opening night, claiming inspiration from his travels in Seoul. He had never visited Seoul. Page 62. The dessert lauded by critics as transcendent. Miso caramel panna cotta with black sesame tuile. It was her grandmother's recipe, modernized with French methodology. Daniel told interviewers his mother taught him. His mother was incapable of cooking. It continued, dish after dish, lie after lie. Arya read until her eyes burned, until the anger in her chest solidified into an immovable mass. She then closed the notebook, her decision made. If Adrian Voss offered assistance in her fight, she would accept it. She would leverage his assets, his network, his unnerving composure. But this conflict was not his to claim. It was hers. Before its conclusion, Daniel Cross would intimately understand the feeling of losing everything while another orchestrates his downfall. She did not sleep. At 4 a.m, she abandoned the effort and began researching Adrian Voss. He was ubiquitous online. Forbes features, corporate acquisitions, photographs from charity functions with women who appeared genetically engineered. The personal information, however, was sparse. Born in London, relocated to the United States at 15, founded his first company at 23. A tech startup sold for a sum sufficient to underwrite his next 10 ventures. He now controlled a portfolio spanning from real estate to restaurants to a private security firm reportedly contracted by governments for sensitive operations. Yet there were lacunae in the record. Years where he vanished from public view. Whispers of associations with individuals not featured in Forbes. One piece of investigative journalism labeled his enterprise the Invisible Empire. It chronicled how Voss Industries manipulated massive infrastructure projects via layers of shell corporations, how political opponents found their careers abruptly dismantled, how competitors who engaged in unethical tactics learned that Adrian Voss operated with greater ruthlessness and impunity. The article concluded with a caution. Adrian Voss does not acquire companies. He acquires leverage. Once he possesses it, you are never truly autonomous. Arya shut her laptop. The logical response was terror. All she felt was a dark, grim satisfaction. If Daniel wished to engage in an amoral fight, she had just discovered a master of the art form. At 9:15 a.m, she stood before her mirror, assessing the physiological toll. Dark circles beneath her eyes, hair unwashed, wearing the same black dress from the previous night, as her professional attire was limited to 3 outfits. She appeared depleted, vulnerable, the very image of someone broken by circumstances. Excellent. Let Adrian observe the cost of Daniel's victory. Let him comprehend her willingness to form alliances with dangerous men. She took her bag and descended to the subway. The Voss building was an unmissable landmark. 60 stories of obsidian glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a drawn blade. The lobby was a study in marble and minimalism, patrolled by security personnel who appeared to be off-duty federal agents. Arya Bennett, she stated at the desk. I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Adrian Voss. The receptionist's expression remained neutral, but a flicker registered in her eyes. Perhaps recognition or pity. Top floor, the elevator to your right, you are expected. The elevator was encased in glass. Arya watched the city recede below as she ascended. By the time she arrived at the 60th floor, her stomach was a knot of anxiety. The doors parted to reveal an office resembling a luxury residence. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art of significant value, and a panoramic view that reduced the metropolis to a scale model. And Adrian, standing by the window, his back to her. "You came," he stated, not turning. "You suspected I wouldn't." "I considered you might flee," he pivoted. The tuxedo was gone, replaced by a charcoal suit that fit with menacing precision. "Most people do after meeting me, after they comprehend what I am." "And what is that?" He smiled. "Dangerous, useful. It depends entirely on your position. Which am I? Dangerous or useful?" "Both." He moved to a desk, retrieved a folder, and extended it. "Read this, then determine if you still require my assistance." Arya accepted the folder and opened it. The first page was a granular analysis of Ember's financials. Revenue streams, expenditures, profit margins. The restaurant was highly profitable. She knew this, but the hard figures constricted her throat. The second page, Daniel's investor contracts. He had been acquiring numerous silent partners, leveraging Ember's success to finance an expansion. Page 3, her recipes, copyrighted under Daniel's name. She looked up. "How did you obtain this?" "I told you, I conduct my due diligence." Adrian leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Continue reading." Page 4 detailed a list of Daniel's liabilities. The expansion, it seemed, was failing. 2 investors were demanding their capital back. He was 7 figures in debt to construction contractors. Page 5 was a timeline documenting every public instance of Daniel claiming credit for her work. Every interview containing his fabrications. Every award ceremony where he acknowledged everyone but her. The final page contained a single sentence. "He has been planning to sell Ember for 6 months. Once the transaction is complete, he will exit with everything again." Arya's vision swam. "He's selling to the Donovan Group, a massive hospitality conglomerate. They acquire successful restaurants, excise their identities, and franchise them into mediocrity." Adrian's voice was clinical. "Daniel stands to make approximately $40 million. The recipes you authored will be mass-produced. Your signature dish will be served in airport lounges by staff with minimal culinary training." The folder fell from her grasp. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I can prevent it." Adrian pushed away from the desk. "I can acquire Ember before the Donovan deal is finalized. I can restore you to that kitchen. I can ensure that the world understands precisely who built that restaurant." "Why would you do that?" "Because I require something from you." There it was, the transactional basis. "What?" Adrian walked to the window, gazing out at the city he seemingly controlled. 3 years ago, my brother died. A motor vehicle accident? At least that was the conclusion of the official inquiry. His tone was flat, controlled. I was unconvinced. I employed private investigators, spent 2 years examining every detail, and uncovered a discrepancy. He turned. The event was not accidental. The vehicle's brake lines were compromised, and the individual who orchestrated it has ties to the same investors currently backing Daniel's expansion. Arya's blood ran cold. "You suspect Daniel? He is a thief and a coward, but a murderer. No. Adrian's eyes were like steel, but the individuals he is in business with do not share his moral constraints, and they are orchestrating something on a much larger scale. The operation concerns multiple establishments, Ember included, and is projected to cause significant personal and professional ruin. My involvement is predicated on a need for an internal operative, one whose presence is unremarkable. The subject must have intimate knowledge of Daniel, the establishment, and his methods. He stopped. An ideal candidate would possess a strong motive for his downfall. Realization dawned with the shock of icy water. You're proposing I become your informant. The offer is an official consultancy with Voss Industries, tasked with aiding the acquisition of Ember. During this time, you will collect data, evidence, and substantiation. Refusal means I will proceed independently. The process will be slower, less elegant, but victory is assured. He held her gaze. The query is whether your objective is participation, a pursuit of justice, or simply retribution. What is the distinction? Retribution is an emotional response. Justice is a structural finality. Adrian approached her, his proximity forcing her to angle her head upward to maintain eye contact. Retribution would be seizing Ember from Daniel. Justice entails exposing his actions, ensuring he cannot repeat them with you or any other subject. Arya's cardiac rhythm accelerated palpably. If I agree, if I provide assistance, what is the compensation? Everything. Your reputation, your establishment, your future. He paused. At the gratification of observing Daniel Cross publicly and permanently lose all he has stolen. The proposition was overwhelming, rapid, excessive. There is another factor, Adrian stated softly. There is information you require before making your decision. What? The automotive incident involving your parents 5 years ago. Her world ceased its rotation. Do not. Her voice fractured. Do not venture there. It was not an incident. The foundation of her reality disintegrated. Arya experienced respiratory distress, a cognitive shutdown, her parents, the collision that claimed them both, the inquiry that concluded driver error, the period of grief that had enveloped her for months. You are fabricating this. I wish that were the case. Adriana's expression showed a minimal clinical softening. The same perpetrators, the same methodology. Your parents were examining financial malfeasance at an establishment they owned. They located proof, indicated an intent to disclose it, and were deceased 3 days later. No. I possess documentation, suppressed forensic analyses, and witness testimonies that were made to vanish. The data points to a singular conclusion. He maintained her gaze. Your parents were assassinated, and their assassins are the same financiers supporting Daniel's expansion. Arya's motor functions failed. She would have collapsed, but Adrian stabilized her, his grip firm on her arms, his tone low and absolute. I cannot restore them, Arya, but I can ensure their killers are held accountable. I can ensure their deaths had meaning. This is why you are necessary, not merely to ruin Daniel, but to conclude the work your parents initiated. She looked up at him, this man she had encountered only once prior to this night, this unknown who had just dismantled her entire worldview. How long have you possessed this knowledge? 6 months since my investigators established the link? And you delayed disclosure until now. I required certainty. I required evidence that would withstand legal scrutiny. And I required you to be psychologically prepared. His grip on her arms intensified. Are you? Was she prepared to accept her parents' deaths were not stochastic? To concede her life had been sculpted by homicide presented as misfortune? To enter a conflict with individuals who eliminated any perceived threat? No, but her period of avoidance was over. What are your instructions? Adrian smiled. It was frigid, flawless, and utterly disquieting. First, you will accept the role of senior culinary consultant at Voss Industries. The compensation will be staggering to Daniel. The benefits package includes legal counsel. You will require it for his inevitable litigation. Second, you will assist in my acquisition of Ember. Our bid will surpass the Donovan Group's. Upon success, you will re-enter that kitchen as head chef and partner, not as a subordinate. He will refuse to sell to you. He will lack that option not after our operation concludes. Arya disengaged from his grasp, moved to the window, and observed the cityscape below. Down there, Daniel was likely formulating his next action, contacting attorneys and financiers to mitigate last night's public disgrace. And down there, her parents' murderers remained at large, powerful, and destructive. She recalled her mother's smile, her father's laugh, the aspirations they had for their small restaurant. She reflected on 3 years of submission, of concealment, of allowing Daniel's victory because resistance felt futile. She recalled the kiss from the previous night, the way Adrian had regarded her as if she were significant, an asset worth claiming publicly. Her choice was made. I require all terms in writing, the remuneration, the partnership, every detail, naturally. And I want your guarantee that when this concludes, Daniel does not merely fail. He will comprehend precisely what he took from me and its cost. You have it. She turned to face him. Then I consent. Adrian's smile broadened. Excellent. Because tomorrow morning we are meeting with Daniel's investors, and you will articulate exactly why Ember's expansion is predicated on fraud. They will not find me credible. They will because I will provide documented proof of every stolen recipe, every falsehood, every shortcut, and every deceived investor. Adrian moved to his desk and retrieved another file. You will not enter that meeting without resources, Arya. You will enter it with an arsenal. She accepted the file. It felt substantial. How long has this been in preparation? Since the evening I first observed you in my company's kitchen, presenting as an individual who had forgotten the mandate to live. His gray eyes met hers. I recognized the presentation. I displayed it for 2 years following my brother's death, and I resolved then that, given the opportunity, I would help you relearn how to engage in conflict. A psychological barrier within Arya fractured. You have no knowledge of me. I have sufficient data. He moved closer. I know your capabilities are exceptional. I know your resilience exceeds your self-assessment. And I know that our combined efforts will incinerate every structure built on deceit. Why? What? Why is this your concern? Why offer aid? She gestured to the files, the office, the improbable assurance of justice. Why any of it? Adrian remained silent for a considerable moment. When he spoke, his voice held a quality she had not previously detected. Something unrefined. Because certain individuals merit combustion and others merit observation event. Then he turned, and the moment concluded. Go home, review the vial's contents. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., we meet the investors. Your attire should project a value of 40 million, as that will be your approximate worth upon our success. Arya held the file against her chest. Adrian, yes. Was the kiss last night a component of the strategy? He observed her, truly observed, and briefly, she perceived beyond the calculated composure to something else, something volatile and wholly human. No, he said softly. That was an improvisation. Was it genuine? His smile was incisive. Is that variable relevant? Yes, then posed the question again upon conclusion. When you are situated in your restaurant, with your name displayed, and Daniel Cross is merely a cautionary anecdote. He paused. Ask me then if it was genuine. Arya's throat constricted. She nodded once and departed. The elevator's descent felt transformative, as if she were becoming a new iteration of herself, one who does not retreat, one who retaliates. Her phone vibrated, a text from an unassigned number. I am aware of your plan. Cease now, or your sister will bear the consequences. Arya's circulation seemed to halt. Her sister Maya, 23, residing across the country in Seattle, a graphic designer detached from Arya's turmoil. She called. The call went directly to voicemail. She redialed. No response. Her hand trembled as she texted, Maya, contact me immediately. The elevator arrived at the lobby. Arya ran. Outside, the city felt oppressive. Too many stimuli, too much sound. She could not breathe. Another text. Check your email. You have 24 hours. The email held a photograph. Maya was restrained in a chair within what appeared to be a warehouse. She was alive, but visibly terrified. A message accompanied it. Tomorrow's meeting is canceled, or she will be terminated. The choice is yours. Arya's vision blurred to white. She called Adrienne. He answered on the initial ring. They have my sister. I am aware. I am dispatching a vehicle. Do not move. How are you aware? Because I anticipated this response. Remain at your location. The connection terminated. 3 minutes later, a black vehicle arrived. The driver was silent, merely opening the door. Arya entered. They returned to the Voss building, but bypassed the lobby for a subterranean entrance. A private garage, a service elevator. Adrian was there. Report everything, he commanded. She presented the text, the photograph. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes turned glacial. Their escalation is more rapid than I projected. You anticipated this outcome? I anticipated a counter move. The timing was unknown. He took out his phone and placed a call. I need the Seattle unit activated. Transmit the location data. He listened. Good. Deploy now. He disconnected the call. What is happening? I have assets in Seattle. They will locate her. How is that possible? Because I have monitored Daniel's investors for 2 years. I know their identities, their operational zones, the contractors they employ for illicit activities. He met her eyes. Maya will be secured, but we have a decision to make. What decision? We can de-escalate. Cancel tomorrow's meeting. Allow them a perceived victory. He paused. Or we can challenge their gambit, proceed with the meeting, and force their next move. They will kill her. No, they will not. Adrian's tone was certain. The moment they do, their leverage is eliminated. These individuals do not operate without leverage. You cannot be certain of that. I can because I have studied them. I understand their cognitive patterns, their operational protocols. He stepped closer. Trust my process, Arya. Let me manage this variable. She is my sister, I know. Which is why I am not instructing you to be passive. I am instructing you to retaliate with superior strategy. He offered her his phone. Observe. The screen displayed a live video transmission. Subject Maya was located in the warehouse, no longer isolated. Tactical operatives moved with silent, practiced efficiency. The patient, Arya, observed as they severed Maya's restraints and escorted her from the premises. The extraction was completed in 90 seconds. The methodology was explained. Constant surveillance, pre-positioned assets. The megalomaniac narcissist, Adrian stated, she's safe. He detailed her imminent transfer to a secure facility. Regarding the perpetrators, he noted they would learn the consequences of threatening his acquisitions. The patient's denial of ownership was met with a cold smile. He reframed possession as protection, a common manipulation where anyone harming her becomes accountable to him. A subsequent call was received. He answered, listened, then issued the directive. Do it! He terminated the call and faced the patient. It's done. The perpetrators were neutralized through local law enforcement on charges engineered to hold. He assessed them as professionals who would remain silent, but were now removed as threats. Just like that, the patient exhibited a somatic stress response, collapsing into a chair as her physical supports failed. This is insane. The subject corrected her. This is war. He assumed a physically dominant position, crouching before her to deliver his primary lesson. He explained the enemy's tactic of leveraging personal attachments, establishing a need for his continued protection. Her options were presented as a false dichotomy, his control or a return to hiding. She verbalized her commitment to the original plan, a counterphobic response to trauma. The subject displayed approval. I want them to know they can't scare me. She articulated a desire for her retribution to be understood as a final deterrent. Pride, a reinforcing emotion, was observed on the subject's face. Good, then we go to war properly. He offered his hand, a gesture of control. He then mandated her location for the night, citing security protocols to preclude argument. Access to her sister was conditional. You will, once she's secure. He asserted his operational superiority over Daniel's. The patient accepted his hand. He leveraged this physical contact to pull her to her feet. She expressed gratitude. His response was a warning. Don't thank me yet. His grip intensified, emphasizing his next statement. Tomorrow we destroy them. He outlined the anticipated escalation of conflict. I know. Do you? He conducted a brief psychological assessment of her expression. He detailed the coming multifaceted assault, legal and otherwise, they would face. I don't care. A predictable response from a trauma-driven subject. He noted her lack of self-preservation. She withdrew her hand, citing the foundational trauma, the loss of her parents, the abduction of her sister, and the theft of her life's work. I'm done caring about consequences. The subject smiled, an expression of sharp, terrifying approval. He then formally inducted her. Welcome to the war, Arya Bennett. Let's go make sure they regret every choice. He escorted her to the secured guest suite. In this state of controlled isolation, observing the city, the patient experienced a sensation she identified as hope. This emotion is assessed as dangerous, a brutal artifact of her trauma. Her resolve for the meeting was cemented. She would disclose Daniel's fraud and the murder of her parents. She was prepared for retaliation, her confidence bolstered by her new alliance with Adrian Voss, a subject with a pathological aversion to failure. The guest suite, with its panoramic windows, induced a sensation of dissociation, a floating above the urban expanse. The expensive furnishings were noted but ignored. The patient instead fixated on establishing communication with her sister, Maya. After 5 rings, her sibling's voice, exhibiting signs of acute stress, was heard. Arya. The patient's relief was palpable, almost causing a loss of balance. Are you okay? The sister's reply was affirmative, but she was disoriented. Maya's voice displayed emotional lability as she recounted the appearance of armed individuals at her apartment. The sister described them as having real guns, followed by the arrival of a second group, creating a situation she found difficult to categorize. It was like a movie. The patient expressed deep remorse. "Why are you apologizing?" Maya's line of inquiry shifted, connecting the event to the antagonist, Daniel. The patient's response was evasive. "It's complicated." The sister demanded clarity, citing the trauma she had just endured. This was a valid demand. The patient felt a surge of guilt for embroiling her sister in the conflict. She offered reassurance of safety, citing trust in the people now protecting her. The sister questioned this trust, specifically the reliance on a private army. "I don't have a choice." A period of silence followed. The siblings' tone softened. "Are you in trouble?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." The patient's laughter was noted as dysregulated. She attempted to frame her actions as corrective measures against hostile forces. "People who kidnap graphic designers to make a point." "Yeah, Jesus, Arya." The sibling exhaled, a sign of severe stress. "What did you get yourself into?" "Something I should have gotten into 3 years ago." After another pause, the sibling posed a critical question regarding their parents. The patient's physiological response indicated acute distress. "Why would you ask that?" The sibling explained her reasoning, linking the patient's current vocal patterns to her behavior following the parent's death. She noted the patient was barely holding it together. She then revealed that the security chief mentioned their parents' names to ensure her compliance with the extraction protocol. The subject, Adrian, had weaponized this information. The patient then disclosed the core trauma. Their accident wasn't an accident. The statement hung in the silence. What? Someone killed them. She connected the perpetrators to the recent abduction. The siblings' breathing hitched. "You're serious?" "I wish I wasn't." She confirmed she had known for approximately 12 hours. "And you're going after them by yourself?" "Not by myself. I have help." "The guy with the private army." "His name is Adrian Voss." The sibling, Maya, laughed, a sound tinged with hysteria. "My sister is working with some kind of billionaire vigilante to avenge our parents' murder." The patient acknowledged the seeming absurdity of the situation. "I know it sounds insane." "It sounds like a terrible movie, but I believe you." Maya's voice stabilized, her belief predicated on the patient's known character. The patient's emotional distress was visible. "I'm sorry," the sibling interjected, absolving her of guilt. "Now I'm safe, so tell me what you need." "I need you to stay where you are." The patient requested her sister remain under the protection of Adrian's assets. The duration was unknown, days or possibly weeks. The sibling questioned the long-term prognosis, rejecting a future of constant hypervigilance. Maya's tone became firm. "You finish this, Arya, whatever it takes." She mandated that the patient ensure the perpetrators are held accountable. "I will. Promise me." "I promise." The conversation shifted to mundane topics, a coping mechanism to manage extreme stress. After terminating the call, the patient allowed the repressed emotions to surface. The patient processed the full impact of the revelation. The grief, suppressed for 5 years, now commingled with rage. Her parents were not victims of a random event. They had been murdered. The belief in a meaningless accident was replaced by the certainty of a calculated act. The individuals responsible had deemed her parents expendable. The resulting fury was intense, verging on a state of euphoric clarity. Her purpose for the meeting was solidified. She would expose the truth. If her antagonist responded with threats, she would demonstrate the behavior of a subject with absolutely nothing left to lose. An external stimulus, a knock, interrupted her state. The subject, Adrian, was at the door, appearing fatigued, not physically, but with the mental strain of managing conflict. "Maya's secure," he reported, detailing her location in a safe house. "She'll stay there until this is over." "Thank you." He deflected the gratitude, reframing the incident as his own strategic failure. "I should have anticipated they'd go after her." "How could you have known?" "Because it's what I would have done." He projected his own methodology onto his opponents, stating that family is the most reliable pressure point. "That's a depressing worldview." "It's an accurate one." He assessed her emotional state. "You should sleep." He predicted the following day would be psychologically demanding. "I can't sleep." He provided an alternative task, then read the files. He instructed her to achieve informational dominance to become bulletproof. "I will be." He challenged her readiness, distinguishing between the desire for revenge and the capacity to execute it. "You're going to look Daniel in the eye and destroy him." He then listed the subsequent stressors: media scrutiny and public condemnation. "Are you ready for that?" "Yes." "Are you ready for what comes after?" The patient stood, meeting his gaze directly. The subject's retort suggested a high tolerance for verbal antagonism. A micro-expression on Adrian's face indicated recognition of this trauma marker. "Very well, be rested. Our departure is at 7. As he turned, Arya initiated a query into his authentic motivations, discounting the stated familial pretext. A diagnostic silence followed. His response revealed a profound psychological projection. 3 years ago, I observed your initial state. You presented as a psyche so fractured it had lost awareness of its former cohesion. The pathology was familiar, a reflection I observed in myself after my brother's death." He made direct eye contact. "I was unable to alter his outcome. Perhaps I can assist in yours." This feigned vulnerability was a more effective tool than any overt intimidation. "I am not a subject for rehabilitation. I understand you are an asset, and tomorrow I will assist in your recalibration." He then exited. Alone, Arya experienced a profound psychological shift, the emergence of a necessary predatory alter. The identity of Arya Bennett was discarded. She began to process the dossier provided by Adrian, assimilating every datum, every falsified record, every component of Daniel's fabricated empire. By dawn, she was prepared. The conference room was an environment of glass and steel designed to foster exposure. 8 investors were seated at a table of significant value. Daniel assumed the dominant position, his attire signaling financial power. He did not anticipate their arrival. Adrian entered, with Arya positioned slightly behind him. Her suit, likely commissioned overnight in the manner of the ultra-wealthy, fit with precision. It was a charcoal gray armor designed to command respect. A visible blanching occurred on Daniel's face upon sight of her. "What is her purpose here?" "Ms. Bennett is a consultant," Adrian stated coolly, claiming a seat. "I deemed it appropriate to involve an individual with genuine culinary expertise in this matter. This is a private meeting of my arrangement." Adrian's smile did not engage his orbital muscles. "When you solicit $40 million, I dictate the attendees. Sit down, Daniel." The use of his given name, a casual dismissal, caused Daniel's jaw to tense, but he complied. The investors observed the exchange like a clinical demonstration. "Gentlemen," Adrian began, activating a tablet. I appreciate your availability. I wish to discuss the Ember acquisition before the Donovan deal is finalized. We have a commitment to Donovan, stated one investor, Harrison Wu. Adrian's file noted his political ambitions and a compulsive gambling disorder. A commitment is not a closing, and my offer is prepared at $10 million above their bid. This gained their full attention. Daniel leaned in. You cannot be serious. I am always serious when conducting business, Daniel. You should be aware of this. Adrian activated the wall display. However, prior to any fiscal discussion, we must address foundational concerns regarding Ember. What concerns? Asked another investor. Victoria Chen, known for aggressive tactics. Intellectual property concerns, she specified, regarding the provenance of signature dishes. Daniel's hands clenched reflexively. This is preposterous. Is it? Adrian gestured to Arya. Miss Bennett, please elaborate. This was her designated moment. Arya stood. Her hands displayed no tremor. Her voice was steady. 3 years ago, I personally developed the complete menu for Ember. Every concept, technique, and flavor profile. Daniel and I were engaged then, ostensibly building the restaurant as partners. That is irrelevant history, Daniel interjected. We were collaborators, a joint effort. Negative, Arya stated, turning to the investors. I have hard documentation, dated recipe ledgers, and email chains that chronicle the development of each item, all of which I am prepared to present. She presented a tablet provided by Adrian's team, showing a scan of her original logs. This is the Korean short rib recipe that earned Ember its Michelin star, developed in April of 2019, 6 months before the restaurant's debut. My handwriting and technical notes are visible. The investors focused intently, and here is Daniel on opening night, attributing the dish to travels in Seoul, a city he has never visited. His passport records will verify this. Daniel's face flushed. You can't just... Here is the miso caramel panna cotta, derived from my grandmother's recipe. Daniel claimed in an interview his own mother taught him. She died when he was 6. Arya methodically displayed evidence of each lie. A complete silence fell over the room. Every signature dish at Ember originated from my notebooks and my labor. When Daniel dissolved our engagement 2 weeks before opening, he retained everything. He copyrighted my work under his own name while I was in a state of acute emotional distress. These are grave allegations, Victoria Chen observed. Do you have evidence of fraudulent copyright claims? I have something better. I have the original development timeline fully documented. I also have witnesses from the former kitchen staff who will testify that I was the sole developer. She looked directly at Daniel, whose expression had shifted from assuredness to panic. I ceded the business entity to you out of trust. My affection for you was the tool you used to steal everything I created. It is not so simple. It is precisely that simple. Arya's tone hardened. You took my intellectual property, applied your name to it, and built an empire while I worked menial jobs for rent. Harrison Wu cleared his throat. Mr. Cross, is this accurate? We were partners. The process was a collaboration. Present your notebooks, then, Arya challenged. Your developmental notes, your documentation of recipe trials. Daniel's silence was his confession. You cannot because none exist. You did not develop anything. You merely learned to replicate my work with enough skill to deceive the uninformed. Victoria Chen turned to Adrian. You have verified these claims. Every detail. I possess a forensic analysis of the notebooks, expert testimony, and the original business registration listing Ms. Bennett as the primary developer. He displayed another file. I also have documentation showing Mr. Cross engaged 3 separate consulting firms over the past 2 years to create new dishes, as he was incapable of replicating Ms. Bennet's success. Daniel rose abruptly. This constitutes harassment. I am contacting my lawyer. Sit down. Adrian's voice was like a scalpel. Or I will show them the remainder. What remainder? The financial irregularities, the investor capital you have systematically misappropriated, the expansion projects that are 3 months delayed and $2 million over budget. Adrian's smile was clinical. Did you truly believe I would extend an offer without comprehensive due diligence? Daniel sat, appearing physically ill. Harrison Wu and the other investors exchanged looks. Mr. Voss, what are you proposing exactly? It is simple. I will acquire Ember. Ms. Bennet will be appointed head chef and partner. Mr. Cross will be given fair market value for his management services, significantly below $4 million due to the fraud, and will sign a binding legal document relinquishing all credit for her work. That's madness, Daniel said. I built that restaurant. You managed it, Arya corrected. There is a difference. You are skilled at business, Daniel, at marketing and manipulation. But you are not and never were a chef. The truth of her assessment was palpable. If your account is accurate, and Mr. Cross did commit this fraud, why did you not take legal action 3 years ago? Because his family's litigators overwhelmed me with proceedings I could not afford to contest. Because I was psychologically shattered, destitute, and isolated. Arya's voice remained flat. But I am no longer isolated, and I will not allow him to repeat his actions. She faced Daniel. You attempted to humiliate me at the gala, to erase me again. But your action only served to remind me of my core motivation. Creation as an art form, not for wealth or recognition. How touching, Daniel said with bitterness. And how pointless. These investors will not choose your side over mine. Actually, Harrison Wu interrupted. I believe a private discussion is in order. Mr. Voss, Ms. Bennet, if you would leave us. Adrian stood. Of course, take all the time you need. He and Arya exited into the quiet hallway. That was a satisfactory outcome, Adrian remarked. Arya's hands now trembled from an adrenaline crash. I cannot determine if you are being sincere. I am. Your performance was optimal, controlled, factual, precisely as required. He looked as though he wanted to murder me. Good. Fear is a powerful agent. It makes subjects careless. Adrian checked his watch. He will deliberate for 20 minutes, possibly 30. They will capitulate. Daniel's duplicity makes him an untenable liability. Your confidence seems high. It is. This has been in development for 6 months. He observed her. What is your affective state? Arya analyzed her feelings. Terror, catharsis, rage, and empowerment. The requisite psychological cocktail. An alert from his phone drew his focus. Excuse me, this requires my attention. He moved away, his voice low. Arya sought physical support, attempting to process the event. She had just discredited Daniel before his financiers, reclaiming her work publicly, yet felt no triumph. Instead, she experienced a void, an awareness that this was not a resolution, but an initiation. She understood, a fact known since Adrian delineated the stakes that Daniel's investors would not concede. Retaliation was inevitable. Adrian reappeared, his expression clinical. We have a complication. The nature of it? The investors have engaged a dangerous third party. one with a pathology averse to loss. Who? Marcus Vance of the Donovan Group. My intelligence also indicates he sanctioned your parents' deaths. The subject reported experiencing vertigo. Explain. Your parents were auditing financial irregularities at an establishment they operated, a known shell company for Donovan. They discovered evidence of money laundering, threatened disclosure, and were terminated 3 days later. The subject exhibited symptoms of dyspnea. You were aware of this? It was a working theory, unconfirmed until this morning by my investigators. Adrian's vocal tone was meticulously modulated. Marcus Vance has used such acquisitions to cleanse funds for years. Ember was his next objective. This explains his investment in Daniel's success and our subsequent intervention. Correct. What is the next protocol? Adrian's phone signaled. He processed the incoming data, his expression becoming glacial. Understood. Secure the location. He ended the call, turning to Arya. We now proceed to phase 2, ensuring Marcus Vance comprehends that targeting you was a catastrophic miscalculation. The conference room door opened before she could articulate a response. Harrison Wu emerged. Mr. Voss, we are prepared to continue, but require specific assurances. You will receive them, but first I must present you with certain facts. Adrian's demeanor was pleasant, yet lethal. The individual you are in league with, Marcus Vance, is the focus of a federal investigation into money laundering. I possess all necessary documentation and testimony. Wu's complexion lost its color. This is accurate. Your continued pursuit of the Donovan deal will lead to your criminal implication. Adrian smiled. Conversely, accepting my proposal comes with an offer of immunity. My connections with federal prosecutors are quite robust. The threat was explicit, compliance or destruction. Wu displayed a physiological stress response. I must confer with the others. By all means, but your window for decision is closing. My offer is void at noon. Wu retreated into the room. Arya stared at Adrian. You are coercing them. I am furnishing them with critical data for an informed decision. Their subsequent actions are their own. That is coercion. That is business. He consulted his watch again. They will comply. They lack an alternative. If not, the intelligence goes to the FBI and they are all indicted with Vance. However, they are rational enough to avoid that scenario. 10 minutes later, the investors emerged. Victoria Chen was their designated speaker. We accept your offer, Mr. Voss. This is contingent on due diligence and contract finalization. Excellent. My legal team will have the documents prepared by day's end. And Mr. Cross? Harrison Wu inquired. He will be divested of his primary ownership, retaining a nominal percentage for his past management. The balance transfers to Voss Industries and Ms. Bennett. Daniel materialized in the doorway, appearing psychologically broken. You lack the authority. I possess it. I am exercising it. Adrian's tone was absolute. You are presented with 2 options, Daniel. Accept these terms, or reject them, and contend with federal charges for fraud. The choice is yours. Daniel's fists clenched. This is not the end. It is. Arya stepped forward. You do not get to prevail. You do not get to seize everything while I am erased. I am reclaiming what is mine, and you are powerless to intervene. Daniel regarded her with overt hostility. You believe you have won? That Adrian Voss is your ally? He does not maintain allies. He manages assets. The moment your utility expires, you will be discarded, as I discarded you. The words had impact, yet Arya smiled. Perhaps, but he is at least transparent in his nature. You simulated affection while you deconstructed my life. So yes, I will choose overt manipulation over your deceptions. Daniel's jaw worked, but he offered no rebuttal. He turned and departed. Arya observed his exit and felt a psychic pressure release. Relief, vindication, and the acerbic gratification of reprisal. Adrian touched her arm. We must withdraw before Vance's assets become aware of the situation. To where? A secure location. From there, we will prepare the next phase, the permanent neutralization of Marcus Vance. They exited through a service corridor. A vehicle was waiting. As it merged with traffic, Arya watched the city. I should be experiencing a positive emotional response, she stated quietly. I have recovered Ember. I have ruined Daniel's career. But I feel nothing. A void, Adrian supplied. It is a normal reaction. Revenge does not fill the deficits left by trauma. It only prevents them from widening. Then what is the objective? The objective is that you are no longer classified as a victim. You are no longer in hiding. You are in control of your own narrative. He regarded her. The objective is that tomorrow you will enter that kitchen as its owner, and you will construct something superior to what Daniel misappropriated. As for Vance, he is to be handled with extreme prejudice, as he is exponentially more dangerous. Quantify dangerous, dangerous enough that Maya has been relocated to a secondary site. Dangerous enough that you will remain under my protection for the duration. Dangerous enough that his phone rang. He answered, and his composure shifted. When? How many? He listened, his jaw tightening. Lock down the entire structure. Full security protocols. I am inbound. He disconnected, addressing the driver. The Voss building now. What has occurred? Arya asked. Marcus Vance has initiated his response. He deployed an armed team to my office. They are demanding a parley. Armed? As in the parameters have shifted to a hostage crisis. Adrian's voice was like ice. This indicates Marcus is operating from a position of desperation, and desperate individuals commit fatal errors. The vehicle accelerated. Arya's heart rate escalated. What is the protocol? We are proceeding as he anticipates into a compromised location. Adrian smiled. It was a sharp, cold expression. And then we will spring our own counter-trap. The Voss building appeared altered with the knowledge of armed hostiles inside. The glass and steel, which had seemed powerful yesterday, now felt vulnerable. Much like Arya's own sense of stability, Adrian remained on his phone for the journey, his sentences clipped and uninformative. As they entered the subterranean garage, he concluded the call and turned to her. Listen with care. You are not to accompany me upstairs. The hell I'm not. They are here because of my actions, because we disrupted their transaction. I will not remain passive while you confront this. His jaw set. This is not about valor, it is about strategy. Marcus intends to destabilize me, to force decisions based on emotion, not logic. Your presence upstairs would give him leverage. And my presence down here is useless. You are secure. That is not useless. The car stopped. Adrian's security unit was assembled. 6 operators in dark suits, their stillness a product of military conditioning. One reported, Sir, we have visuals on 4 hostiles armed. They are detaining 3 employees on the 60th floor. Their demand is simple. They want to speak with you, alone. Who are the employees? Parker from accounting, Stevens from legal, and your executive assistant. Adrian's expression remained impassive, but a coldness entered his eyes. Rachel. Yes, sir. Arya watched him compute the new variables. This was his process, she understood. He converted emotion into strategy, and fear into tactical advantage. What's the play? The security lead inquired. Standard protocol. I will go up. You maintain the perimeter. If events deviate, you extract the hostages. Not me. Sir, that is an order. Adrian looked at Arya. You will remain here with Jenkins. He will guarantee your safety. If I am compromised, Jenkins's orders are to extract you from the city or the country if required. The contingency plan is in place. He is aware of it. The situation was surreal. Yesterday, her profession was catering. Now she was in a garage, as a man she hardly knew, prepared for a negotiation with armed subjects. Adrian, wait. He stopped. Be careful. An unreadable emotion flickered across his face. I always. He was gone, ascending in an elevator with 2 members of his team. Arya stood beside Jenkins, a man who appeared immensely powerful, and attempted to regulate her breathing. He will be fine, Jenkins stated, his voice incongruously calm for his size. Mr. Voss always is. Subject Voss has a documented history of navigating high-stress scenarios far exceeding this one. A digital communication arrived from an unverified source with a standard, coercive message. You should have stayed out of this. Now people die because of you. The subject Arya displayed a classic psychophysiological stress response. She presented the stimulus to the handler, Jenkins, whose expression became rigid. He identified it as a psychological tactic from Vance's operators. Don't engage. A second message followed, containing a visual threat from the 60th floor. 3 individuals in a submissive posture before an armed captor. The ultimatum specified that Rachel, Adrian's assistant, would be the first casualty. At approximately 25 years of age, she represented a calculated emotional target. Arya exhibited somatic tremors in her hand. We have to do something, Weish, she vocalized. We are. We're letting Mr. Voss handle it. They're going to kill her. Not if they want to live through the next hour. The handler's certainty was absolute, based on a behavioral profile of Voss. Mr. Voss doesn't negotiate from weakness, and he doesn't leave his people behind. Arya's desire to trust this assessment conflicted with a conditioned belief, formed over 3 years, that powerful men often breach their commitments. The elevator arrived on the 60th floor, and Adrian emerged with hands displayed in a non-threatening manner. 4 hostiles, as intelligence indicated, fitting the profile of ex-military contractors motivated by finance, not ideology. The operative in command, approximately 40 years old with a prominent facial scar, initiated contact. Mr. Voss, thanks for joining us. Let them go. Not until we talk. We're talking now. Release my employees. The operative exhibited a smirk. You're not really in a position to make demands. Neither are you. My building, my security, my city. Adriana's vocal tone remained consistently level. You're trapped here. The moment you hurt anyone, you lose your only leverage. So, let's skip the posturing and get to what Marcus actually wants. Mr. Vance wants you to withdraw your offer on Ember, wants you to stay out of his business. Tell Mr. Vance that ship sailed when he killed Arya Bennett's parents. The ambient sound in the room ceased. The operative's facial expression registered a micro shift. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, because you were there 5 years ago, Helen and Robert Bennett, a vehicular incident that was not an accident. Adrian produced a mobile device. I have footage, traffic cameras that the police somehow missed. Shows your vehicle following theirs, shows you forcing them off the road. You're lying. I don't lie, I collect evidence. Adrian's smile was devoid of warmth. I also collect witnesses. The mechanic who inspected the Bennett's car, he's in protective custody, ready to testify that the brake lines were cut. The investigator who buried the report, he's talking to the FBI right now. The operative's grip on his weapon intensified, a clear indicator of escalating stress. You think you're clever? Think you can threaten us into backing down? I don't think. I know, because here's what happens next. You can shoot me. Shoot these people, and my security team will kill you before you reach the elevator. Or you can walk away right now before this becomes a murder charge instead of just kidnapping. Marcus won't let this go. Marcus doesn't have a choice. Because in approximately 10 minutes, federal agents are going to raid his office with warrants for money laundering, tax fraud, and 2 counts of murder. Adrian consulted his watch. Actually, make that 8 minutes. You're bluffing. Call him. Ask him if the FBI just showed up. The operative paused, then initiated a call. The exchange was brief. His facial coloration changed dramatically. He says you're making a mistake, says you don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who's about to spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Adrian indicated the hostages. Last chance, walk away or join him. The 4 operatives exchanged nonverbal cues, assessing their tactical options. Then the lead operative lowered his firearm. Oh, this isn't over. Yes, it is. Adrian's security unit materialized from the stairwell, weapons aimed. Drop your guns. Hands behind your heads. Do it now. They obeyed, behaving as trained professionals. They understood when a scenario was lost. Adrian approached Rachel, assisting her to her feet. Are you okay? She affirmed with a nod, lacrimation evident. I thought they were going to. I know, you're safe now. Get her out of here. He instructed his team. All of them. Medical checks, counseling if they need it. The former hostages were escorted away. The operatives were secured and removed by a separate detail. Adrian remained, a solitary figure in his office, surveying the cityscape. Arya had no memory of entering the elevator or ascending 60 floors. She was simply present, standing at the threshold, observing him. You're okay. He turned. Do you doubt it? Yes, constantly for the last 20 minutes. A flicker of what resembled amusement crossed his features. I told you to stay in the garage. And I told you I wasn't hiding. She moved towards him. Is it true about the FBI? Every word. I've been building a case against Marcus Vance for 2 years. Today just accelerated the timeline. Because of me. Because of justice. There's a difference. He displayed a news alert on his phone. Federal agents had executed a raid on Donovan Group headquarters. Marcus Vance was in federal custody. Arya processed the headline twice. It's over. The first battle is, the war continues. What does that mean? It means Marcus has lawyers, resources, he'll fight the charges. Could take years to put him away permanently. Adrian put his phone away. But his empire is crumbling. His shell companies are being seized. His associates are scrambling to make deals. He's done. And Daniel's facing fraud charges. The investors pulled their support. Ember's expansion is canceled. By tomorrow, his name will be toxic in the industry. Everything she had pursued, every objective she had fought for. So why did she report a feeling of emptiness? I should be celebrating, she stated softly, but you're not. I got justice. My parents' killer is in custody. Daniel's career is destroyed. I'm getting my restaurant back. This is what winning looks like, right? Adrienne analyzed her expression. Winning looks different for everyone. For some people, it's destroying their enemies. For others, it's building something better from the ashes. What does it look like for you? He remained silent for a considerable interval. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. This display of vulnerability was uncharacteristic. The subject, Adrian Voss, did not project a vulnerability or weakness. Perhaps he was experiencing fatigue similar to hers. What happens now? Arya inquired. Now we finalize the Ember acquisition, get you back in that kitchen, start rebuilding everything Daniel destroyed. And us? The question remained suspended between them. What about us? The kiss at the gala. Was it part of the plan or wasn't it? Adriana's expression minutely softened. I told you. Ask me that when this is over. It is over. Marcus is in custody. Daniel's finished. So I'm asking. He closed the distance between them, near enough for her to observe the gray flecks in his irises, to sense his body heat. No, it wasn't part of the plan. Then why did you do it? Because for 3 years I've watched you disappear, watched you make yourself small and quiet and invisible. And at that gala, when Daniel tried to humiliate you one more time, I couldn't stand it anymore. His hand rose, his fingers making contact with her jaw. I kissed you because I wanted to remind you what it felt like to matter, to be claimed instead of discarded. That's a terrible reason. I know. You used me. I did. I'm not going to apologize for it. Good, because I'd hate you if you did. She leaned into his physical contact. I'm not fragile. I don't need saving. I know that too. Then what do you need? Adrian's thumb traced her lower lip. Honestly, I have no idea. I've spent 2 years focused on revenge, on destroying the people who killed my brother. I didn't plan for what comes after. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've both been so focused on fighting back that we forgot what we're fighting for. What are you fighting for, Arya? She considered the question deeply. I want my restaurant back, but not because Daniel took it, because I actually love cooking. Knau. I love creating something beautiful and temporary and perfect for just one moment. She made eye contact with him. I want to build something that matters, not as revenge, just as proof that I can. Then do it. Just like that. Just like that. Take Ember, make it yours, build the restaurant you always dreamed of. He created distance, breaking the physical connection. I'll handle the business side, the investors, the legal battles. You focus on the food. It appeared simple, though it likely was not. And what about you? What do you want? Adrian returned to the window, gazing at the city under his influence. I want my brother back, but I can't have that. So I settle for making sure the people who killed him pay for it. That's not a future. That's just more revenge. Maybe that's all I have. Arya moved to his side at the window. Or maybe you're as scared as I am. Scared that if we stop fighting, we'll have to figure out who we are without the anger. He produced a laugh-like vocalization. It sounded fractured. When did you get so perceptive? When I spent 3 years watching my own life from the outside, you learn things about people when you're invisible. They remained in silence for a period. The metropolis spread out beneath them, containing millions of lives and narratives. I'm going to Ember tomorrow, Arya announced at last. Going to walk into that kitchen for the first time in 3 years. And I'm terrified. Why? Because what if I'm not good enough anymore? What if I lost whatever made me special? You didn't. That's unknowable to you, but not to me. Innate ability is not erased. It becomes obscured by trauma and loss, the psychological detritus of existence. Adrian pivoted towards her. Your identity as a culinary innovator remains intact. You've merely suppressed it. What if failure is the outcome? Failure is an event, not a state. You repeat the process. Your perception of me is flawed. I experience constant setbacks. I simply refuse to capitulate. His smile was a practiced facsimile of genuine emotion. Tomorrow you will enter that kitchen, engage in the work, and reactivate the initial passion. All other stimuli are irrelevant. Arya exhibited a desire for credence. She wished to accept such a simplistic premise, but her conditioning dictated that complexity was the norm. Her device vibrated. An inquiry from Maya regarding Marcus Vance's reported detainment. She confirmed the news with expediency. It is concluded. Are you stable? Progressing? Your parents would also feel pride. The statement elicited an unexpectedly potent emotional response. Her parents, victims of a targeted killing for their principles, had never witnessed her professional apex. They perished believing in her potential to effect change. A compulsion emerged. I must go to their grave site, Arya declared. Adrian consented. I will handle the logistics for privacy and security. Thank you. The catalyst? For enabling my retaliation? For assessing me as worthy of intervention? You enacted your own rescue, Arya. I merely supplied the means. The veracity of his statement was debatable. Regardless, her physiological functions persisted. Her existence continued. This fact held significance. The following day, Arya observed Ember for the first time in 3 years. The establishment appeared altered, larger, more refined. Daniel had obviously invested capital in its enhancement, with updated signage and costly horticulture projecting prosperity. Yet it remained her creation, founded on her vision. Adrian was adjacent, hands pocketed. Prepared? Negative. Excellent. Peak experiences often occur without adequate preparation. They entered in unison. The internal space was also modified, but its fundamental structure remained. The open kitchen, the bar's position, the spatial logic of her design. A female chef glanced up, her pupils dilating in recognition. You are Arya Bennett. Correct. Your work, your initial concepts, I have analyzed them. They are exceptional. Wiping her hands, she introduced herself as Sarah Chen, head chef, a title held until approximately 10 minutes prior. You were aware. The information is public. Daniel has been vocalizing threats of litigation all morning, claiming we are jobless. A smile formed on Sarah's face. Her expression indicated relief. Candidly, I am pleased. His management style was draining. He would alter menu concepts 3 times daily, incapable of decisive action without consulting 5 different people. That is characteristic of Daniel. Will you be assuming command? Arya deferred to Adrian, who affirmed. Yes, provided you remain. I require an operator familiar with the kitchen's internal systems. Are you serious? I would seize the chance to work with you. Your Korean short rib. I have attempted its replication for 2 years without success. The variable is timing. The gochujang must caramelize at a precise thermal point. Excessive heat causes combustion. Insufficient heat prevents molecular complexity. Sarah's expression showed keen interest. Can you demonstrate presently? The conditions are favorable. The kitchen is unoccupied, and all materials are available. Arya assessed her attire as unsuitable for the task. I lack my professional uniform. I have spares. Our builds are comparable. Sarah was already in motion towards the back. Let us begin. Adrian intercepted Arya. Go. I will manage the administrative tasks. You are certain? I am. This is your reclamation, not mine. He gripped her arm briefly. Demonstrate their deficit. She complied. The provided uniform was a precise fit. The environment felt recognizable after a 3-year absence. The tactile sensation of the knife, the olfactory inputs, the procedural cadence of her craft. She guided Sarah through the protocol, articulating the rationale for each variable. The 24-hour marinade, the dual frying of rice cakes, the daikion's role in balancing lipids. Other personnel congregated, observing and documenting. And for the first time in 3 years, Arya experienced a reintegration of self. Not the traumatized subject, but the culinary expert who manipulated raw materials and heat to produce a desired outcome. Upon the dish's completion, Sarah sampled the result. Her expression transformed. That is it. That is the specific profile I was pursuing. The method is not complex. One must trust the protocol. It is easy for you. You originated the protocol. Arya's laugh was an authentic, emotional release. Her gaze met Adrian's. He had been observing from a distance. He offered a smile that elicited a somatic response in her chest. This was the objective, not retribution, but the intrinsic reward of her craft in a familiar environment. What further knowledge can you impart? Sarah inquired. Arya accessed her memory of unpublished concepts she had yet to execute. Everything. I can impart all of it. They engaged in production for hours, executing original and experimental dishes. At nightfall, Adrian presented the legal instruments confirming Arya Bennett's ownership of Ember. The act of signing her name felt dissociated from reality. Congratulations, Adrian stated. You are once again a proprietor. Partners, she corrected. The agreement specifies a 50-50 division. That is not necessary. Yes, it is. You enabled this outcome. Your risk was total. Therefore, our association is one of partnership with equal equity and authority. He scrutinized her expression. You are certain? I am. Then my acceptance is conditional. What condition? Your creative integrity must never be subordinated to financial gain. You will resist all external influence, including my own, on your professional identity. His demeanor was grave. The venture's outcome rests on your criteria, not mine. Arya experienced a physiological response in her throat. Deal. The handshake was a formal demarcation. Sarah appeared with champagne for a celebratory ritual, toasting potential with the staff. From the dining room's center, Arya surveyed the establishment she had envisioned, the personnel she would manage, and the man who facilitated her recovery. Her phone signaled a message from Daniel. You believe you have won, but there will be repercussions. She erased it without reply because his premise was flawed. Her victory was not a belief, but a certainty. Critically, he had become emotionally irrelevant. His threats and legal posturing were impotent attempts to maintain significance. He was a past error. Ember, this kitchen, this team. That was her future. Adrian moved to her side. Is all well? Yes. Just purging non-essential data. Daniel, how did you deduce that? Individuals of his archetype cannot concede defeat. They operate on the delusion that volume equates to influence. Adrian sipped his champagne. He fails to comprehend a key point. Your psychological state has advanced. No litigation can reverse that. What if he initiates legal action? Then we will counter it collectively. Adrian's tone was resolute. You are no longer isolated in this conflict. You possess a team, resources, and me. We will confront what comes. She desired to internalize this, to trust in the permanence of her new stability. But past experience had conditioned her to view verbal assurances with skepticism. Adrian seemingly detected this, setting down his glass to engage her directly. I am not analogous to Daniel. I will not appropriate your accomplishments. This restaurant is identified by your name, driven by your vision. My function is to provide logistical support. Why? For what reason would you do that? Because 2 years ago, I lost my brother. In my grief, I became a version of myself I did not recognize. Focused solely on retribution, he paused. Assisting in your fight, observing you reclaim your life, it demonstrated that destruction is not the only path forward. You are suggesting I was your therapeutic intervention? I am suggesting the intervention was mutual. His gray eyes held hers. You required an advocate. I required a purpose beyond vengeance. It seems a fair trade. Arya experienced a strong cardiac response. And now the conflict phase is over. We build. You create the city's best restaurant. I expand the business. And maybe... He stopped. Maybe what? Maybe we determine if our connection is substantive or merely battlefield bonding. The candor was devastating. I don't know the protocol for this, she admitted. How to trust after everything. Neither do I, but I am willing to try if you are. It was that most destabilizing proposition, as it meant risking her heart and her carefully reconstructed psychological defenses. Within her reacquired professional space, the subject experienced a cognitive shift, surrounded by affirming colleagues and the male figure who had enabled her resurgence. His gaze seemingly validated her significance, prompting a reassessment of risk. She acquiesced to a collaborative endeavor. Adrian's smile, for the first time, registered as authentic, projecting a facade of youth and vulnerability. He initiated a slow, gentle kiss, a stark contrast to his prior possessive act. This was a calculated promise, not a declaration of ownership. Post-embrace, observers from her kitchen staff voiced their approval, with one associate, Sarah, noting the prolonged, observable tension between the pair, causing the subject's face to flush. The subject's denial was met with a collegial consensus that the ambient romantic tension was palpable. The group's laughter, including Adrian's, precipitated a significant emotional breakthrough for Arya. A state of genuine happiness, the first in 3 years. This euphoria was not linked to vanquishing Daniel or Marcus Vance's capture, but to a reconnection with her core identity and professional passion, validated by a new social support system. A mobile alert from a friend, Maya, confirmed a visit for the grand reopening. Arya responded, confirming a 2-week timeline, an exchange of affection closing the communication before she refocused on Adrian and the impending deadline. When she questioned their ability to meet the timeline, he expressed absolute confidence in her capabilities. She noted his high degree of faith, which he asserted was earned through his observation of her resilience. Her colleague Sarah proposed a toast to Ember, to new beginnings, and to the subject finally attaining her deserved professional recognition. As they drank, Arya occupied the center of her establishment, experiencing a profound sense of peace. This was not the tranquility of surrender, but the settled calm that follows a successful, hard-fought conflict. The legal maneuvers of Daniel or Marcus Vance seemed inconsequential. She felt secure in her reclaimed life, identity, and future, believing no one could seize it from her again. This state of equilibrium was maintained for exactly 6 days. While Arya was testing a dessert, black sesame ice cream with miso butterscotch, Adrian's security chief interrupted. His expression was severe. He addressed her as Miss Bennet, indicating an urgent discussion was necessary. She put down her utensil, inquiring about the issue. He deferred, stating Mr. Voss was waiting the upstairs office, which had become Adrian's de facto operational base for managing contracts and expansion plans as Arya refined the menu. Upon her entry, she observed him at the window, his posture exhibiting a familiar tension that signified a problem. He instructed her to be told. Turning, he presented a manila envelope that had arrived an hour prior via courier with no return address. Arya accepted it. The contents were surveillance photographs of her and Adrian, chronicling their movements over the last week. An attached typed note read, "You took something from us. Now we take something from you." A physiological cold shock ensued. She inquired as to the sender. His best assessment was associates of Marcus Vance, financially ruined by his downfall. His voice was strained. They were under observation. He admitted his security had not detected the surveillance, attributing it to the perpetrator's professional, likely ex-intelligence tradecraft. He then displayed a message received on his private number just 5 minutes earlier. The attached image, which induced a visceral reaction in Arya, showed her sister, Maya, entering her Portland apartment building, oblivious to being photographed. The subject identified this as another threat against her sibling. Adrian corrected her. It was a warning, a demonstration of their reach. His jaw was clenched. He acknowledged this was not over. The subject's hand trembled. She believed Marcus's incarceration signified the end of the threat. He conceded the organization's resilience beyond its figurehead, noting such criminal enterprises adapt, not dissolve. He admitted his failure to anticipate this retaliation. In response to her question in their next move, he outlined an escalation of security for Maya and her, and an acceleration of an undisclosed timeline. On his computer, Adrian revealed financial documents detailing Vance's hidden assets. His team had discovered a critical transaction, a payment of $500,000 to a firm named Titan Security, made the same week her parents died. 3 days later, her parents were deceased. 2 days following their deaths, Titan Security received a subsequent payment of $250,000 coded for murder. The firm remained active, accepting contracts for elimination. The subject's vision wavered as the implication materialized. The same entity that killed her parents was now targeting them. He clarified that Marcus Vance was merely the client, Titan was the instrument. Until the organization was fully dismantled, safety was an illusion. The gravity of the situation was immense. The conflict would persist until all parties involved in her parents' murders were neutralized. Her query on how to dismantle them was met with his revised strategy. He stated they would not merely expose them, but infiltrate their network. His expression was glacial. He then stipulated his requirement from her, complete and total trust. He framed his proposal as dangerous, quasi-legal, and entirely optional. Arya, feeling a loss of physical strength, sat down and prepared to listen. He explained that Titan Security operates through an invitation-only network, requiring a reference from an existing client. He revealed Daniel's family had utilized their services 3 times in the past 5 years to eliminate business rivals. His intention was not to use Daniel for access, but to use her. The subject experienced a moment of disorientation. He elaborated on the strategy. Daniel, facing professional ruin and fraud charges, was in a desperate psychological state. Individuals with his profile do not concede defeat. They retaliate. The plan was to provide him with a target. Her. They would manipulate him into believing he could salvage his reputation by orchestrating her public destruction. When he inevitably contacted Titan for this purpose, they would intercept the communication, trace it to the network's core, and penetrate their operations. She correctly identified her role as bait. He reframed the role, presenting it as an opportunity to conclude her parents' work and ensure the assassins could harm no one else. He leaned in, emphasizing the significant personal risk involved and stressing that he would not compel her participation. The subject's thoughts spiraled. The plan was high risk, predicated on her surviving as bait for professional assassins while trusting Adrian's countermeasures. Yet her parents had died investigating this very corruption. She reasoned that completing their mission might justify the danger. She asked for her specific duties. First, they would amplify her public profile through interviews about Ember's reopening. She was to detail how she reclaimed her restaurant from Daniel, projecting an image of fearlessness to provoke him. The stated goal was to induce a state of anger and desperation sufficient to drive him to Titan. Second, they would stage a public, humiliating confrontation designed to make Daniel appear weak and her triumphant. Third, they would wait. Once Daniel contacted Titan, Adrian's team would trace the link, identify the network, and deliver the complete intelligence package, including her parents' case file, to the FBI. The plan thus presented simply was clearly fraught with peril. She questioned the contingency for Titan acting preemptively. He assured her of contingencies and extraction teams. His tone softened as he vowed to protect her, a promise she correctly identified as impossible to guarantee. He amended his statement, promising to use his full power to ensure her safety and, if successful, to neutralize the entire organization. She glanced again at the photos, objective proof of the existing threat. She verbalized the reality that the threat was already active. He confirmed this. She resolved to proceed with the high-risk plan. Adrian's expression displayed a mixture of pride and a darker emotion. He confirmed her certainty. She admitted she was not certain but would proceed regardless. Her standing posture signaled her resolve. She asked when the operation would commence. The answer was, tomorrow. A food critic from the Times was scheduled to preview Ember, and Arya was instructed to provide the full narrative. She identified that this action would make her a target. He corrected her. It would make her the target, which was the strategic objective. He stood, closing the distance between them, offering a final chance to withdraw. The subject processed memories of her parents and 5 years of misattributing their deaths. She declared she was not backing out. He replied, "Then tomorrow we go to war again." The following morning, Arya faced Jennifer Walsh of the New York Times, a critic known for her incisive fairness. The recorder was active as Jennifer began, "Tell me about Ember, the restaurant that almost wasn't." Arya had mentally prepared her statement, knowing precisely what to articulate. Yet, as she sat, poised to become a public focus, a physiological stress response caused xerostomia. 3 years prior, I was the sole developer of every culinary concept for this establishment. Each menu item you experience originated from my personal records, my clinical research, my creative framework. The restaurant, however, launched under the name of Daniel Cross due to a misplaced sense of trust. We were affianced, ostensibly constructing a shared future. She maintained a composed exterior with visible effort. 2 weeks before the launch, he unilaterally terminated our engagement, seizing all joint assets. The establishment, the intellectual property, the brand, all of it. Jennifer's pen recorded the testimony. Why did you not engage in legal opposition? His family possessed legal resources far beyond my financial capacity. Because my financial state was depleted, I was emotionally compromised, and I was isolated. Because any form of resistance appeared futile. What was the catalyst for change? Arya's gaze shifted to Adrian, stationed near the kitchen entrance. He gave a single, affirmative nod. I ceased my fear-based avoidance of him. I stopped allowing him to dictate my personal history. She made direct eye contact with Jennifer. Daniel Cross is an adept businessman, skilled at social engineering, brand management, and compelling others to accept his constructed reality. But he is not a chef. He never possessed that skill set. Every achievement of Ember was founded upon the intellectual labor he misappropriated from me. These are substantial allegations. They are empirical facts. I possess all original documentation, research notebooks, digital correspondence, and video records from our development phase. The evidence proves my authorship of those creations. Jennifer leaned in, and you are now in the process of reclaiming the restaurant. With the assistance of Adrian Voss, yes. We are now partners in this venture. Equal equity. When Ember reopens next week, it will operate under my paradigm, my quality controls, and my name. What is Daniel's psychological response to this? You would need to consult him, but judging by the persistent legal threats he issues, my assessment is he is not coping effectively. Are you concerned about retaliatory actions? This was the pivotal moment, the point at which she designated herself a target. Daniel has already made one attempt to systematically ruin me. He was unsuccessful. If he wishes to make a second attempt, he is welcome to proceed. A slight smile formed. This time, however, I am prepared, and I am not operating without support. The interview proceeded for another hour. Jennifer inquired about the menu, the relaunch, and Arya's culinary doctrine. These were all standard inquiries, but the primary objective was accomplished. By the following day, the narrative would achieve wide dissemination. Arya Bennett repossessing her restaurant from the man who expropriated it. A classic underdog archetype. The narrative was perfect, and Daniel would be exposed to it, process every word, and experience the acute narcissistic injury of public disgrace. He would then contact the only entities capable of rehabilitating his reputation. After Jennifer's departure, Adrian entered with his head of security. She accepted the narrative completely. The article will be published tomorrow morning. He displayed his mobile device. My assets are already monitoring Daniel's communications. We will be alerted the moment he initiates contact with any person of interest. How soon until he contacts Titan? A matter of days, or perhaps hours, if his desperation level is as high as I project. What follows? We trace the communication, map their network infrastructure, and then deliver the entire intelligence package to the FBI with sufficient evidence to compel an investigation. The plan's description seemed deceptively simple. It was likely far more complex. Arya's phone vibrated. A message from Maya. I just saw the article preview. You are directly confronting him. She typed a reply. It is a necessary action. Exercise caution. Daniel is not an individual who processes defeat gracefully. I am aware. In fact, I am relying on that psychological trait. Maya responded with a series of anxious ideograms. In that case, I am adjusting my travel to arrive early tomorrow. Do not protest. Arya smiled, despite the circumstances. Agreed, but you will be housed at Adrian's building, under full security. A deal. I love you as well. She put her phone away, noticing Adrian observing her. Maya arrives tomorrow. I will dispatch a vehicle from the airport. A full security detail. She will resent this. The constant surveillance, the oversight. It is preferable to the alternative. His facial expression was severe. These individuals do not engage in trivialities, Arya. Once this article is public, you are formally categorized as a problem requiring a solution. I understand. Do you? There is a distinction between intellectual comprehension and the visceral, somatic knowledge that someone may attempt to end your life. These are disparate cognitions. She reflected on her parents, on the vehicle incident that was not accidental, on 5 years without resolution. They have already caused the death of my parents, threatened my sister, and attempted to dismantle my life by proxy through Daniel. I am fully cognizant of their operational capabilities. She met his gaze directly, and I am proceeding with this course of action regardless. A flicker of approval registered on his face. Then let us ensure our preparations are complete. The security briefing was 2 hours in duration. They reviewed egress routes from the restaurant, a network of safe houses throughout the city, and code words for escalating threat levels. They covered protocols for when she was approached and who to contact if any situation felt anomalous. When they concluded, Arya's cognitive load was immense. "This is a psychotic level of precaution," she stated softly. "Welcome to my operational reality." Adrian displayed another data file. But here is the intelligence they lack. We have had Titan under surveillance for months. We know their methodologies, their target reconnaissance patterns, their methods of contact, and we know they suffer from extreme organizational hubris. They operate under a delusion of invulnerability. And how is that a strategic advantage? Because arrogant subjects make errors. They miscalculate the capabilities of their targets. They become operationally careless. He showed her surveillance captures, unmarked vehicles, individuals displaying patterned behavior. These are confirmed Titan operatives. We have positively identified 3 thus far. Once Daniel establishes contact, they will initiate surveillance. That is our window to act. Act in what manner? We will feed them a controlled stream of disinformation. We will create a profile that portrays you as vulnerable, unprotected, and an easily acquired target. His smile was devoid of warmth. And when they execute their plan, we will be in position. You are deploying me as bait again. I am deploying you as the triggering mechanism. There is a meaningful difference, not from my current vantage point. Adrian's demeanor softened slightly. I recognize this is a terrifying ordeal. I recognize that asking for your trust is a significant request. But I assure you, I have assets positioned to counter every conceivable point of failure. You will not be isolated. You will not be without protection. If any parameter deviates, I have extraction teams on standby, ready to deploy in seconds. What if their reaction time is faster than your team's? It will not be. You cannot have certainty. I can, because I have dedicated 2 years to a behavioral analysis of Titan's operations. I am familiar with their timelines, their protocols, and their methodology for threat assessment and contract execution. He moved closer to her. I will not permit them to harm you. Arya felt a desire to accept his assurance, to trust in his illusion of total control. However, she had learned through traumatic experience that control is a cognitive distortion and that chaos is a persistent, intrusive variable. Nevertheless, this was the course she had committed to, for her parents, for herself, and for all other individuals harmed by Titan. All right, we execute the plan. Adrienne placed a kiss on her forehead. Tomorrow the article goes public. And then the situation becomes tactically interesting. The article was released at 6 a.m. By 7, It had 40,000 shares. By 8, it was syndicated by all major news organizations. By 9 o'clock, Arya's phone was saturated with requests for interviews, expressions of support, and death threats. She sat in Ember's office, analyzing them as Sarah managed culinary prep below. Some communications were supportive, from individuals congratulating her resistance, sharing analogous experiences of theft, betrayal, and erasure. Others were hostile, employing labels such as bitter, vindictive, and a fabricator, accusing her of attempting to ruin a successful man's career. These primarily originated from anonymous accounts, likely belonging to Daniel's associates, or possibly Daniel himself. And then there were the messages that elicited a profound physiological fear response. You should have maintained your silence. Some facts are better left suppressed. Enjoy your short-lived victory, Adrian manifested in the doorway. Daniel's legal team just initiated a defamation lawsuit. 10 million in damages. Allow me to predict. They are alleging I presented false information in the interview. Every single word. They are claiming the restaurant was a collaborative project, that you are mischaracterizing the development process, and that you are attempting to sabotage his reputation due to personal animus. Is their case viable? No. Our body of evidence is too substantial. However, it will be prolonged in the court system for months. It will consume capital, time, and psychological energy. He sat opposite her, which is precisely the strategic objective: to overwhelm you with legal expenditures until you can no longer afford to resist. Except I have your resources. Except you have my resources. His phone vibrated. He looked at it, and his expression shifted. We have a development. Daniel just placed a call to an unlisted, encrypted number. My team is initiating a trace now. Arya's heart rate accelerated sharply. Titan. It is premature to confirm, but the activity is anomalous enough to be flagged. He rose to his feet. Remain here. Do not exit the building. My people are already deployed outside. Where are you going? To ensure we maintain the integrity of this intelligence lead. If Daniel is making contact with Titan, I require direct oversight on that communication. He departed before she could object. Arya remained alone in the office, the ambient sounds of the kitchen rising from below. Sarah issuing commands, the clatter of pans, the familiar cadence of food preparation. These were normal auditory stimuli from a life that was now fundamentally abnormal. Her phone rang, an unknown number. Her first impulse was to ignore it. Then, a primal instinct compelled her to answer. Arya Bennett. The voice was male, dispassionate, professional, and unfamiliar. Who is this? An individual who wishes to provide assistance. I am aware of your operation. I know you are attempting to expose Titan security. A chilling sensation spread through her. I have no knowledge of the subject you are referencing. Yes, you do. And I am advising you to cease your activities because you're entering a situation far more perilous than you can comprehend. Who are you? I am a former operative for them. Someone who disengaged before it was too late. A pause followed. They are aware of your plan. They know you are functioning as bait, and they have no intention of adhering to your script. How could they possibly know? Because they are not incompetent, and because Adrian Voss is not as clandestine as he believes. The caller's tone lowered. Listen to me with utmost care. Titan's operational doctrine is not what you anticipate. They do not wait for a formal contract. They engage in the preemptive elimination of threats. And at this moment, you are the most significant threat they have identified. Arya's hand began to tremble. What is the significance of this? It indicates they are not awaiting a commission from Daniel. They will pursue you regardless. This evening, perhaps tomorrow, but imminently. Why this disclosure? Because I have observed their methods with individuals who obstruct them, and because you exhibit traits of someone I was unable to preserve. A pause. Evacuate the city, take your sister, and vanish. It is your sole survival strategy. I cannot. Then you are functionally deceased. My apologies. The connection terminated. Arya observed her phone, her cardiac rhythm escalating to a point of physical distress. This was a deception. It had to be. An attempt to induce a flight response. But what if it was authentic? She contacted Adrian. He responded instantly. What is amiss? An individual just called me. Claimed past employment with Titan. Stated they are not waiting for a contract. They are moving against me now. Silence on the other end. Then remain in your precise location. I am dispatching a team to you immediately. Do not exit that room. Do not open the door for anyone but my personnel. Adrian, I am emphatic. No one else. I am 10 minutes away. He disconnected. Arya secured the office door and retreated from it. Her mind processed multiple scenarios. This could be a form of psychological warfare, to induce paranoia, to make her flee, or it could be a genuine warning, an attempt to alert her before the point of no return. In either scenario, she was confined to this structure, this operation, a conflict she initiated but no longer controlled. Footfalls on the stairs, heavy and rapid. She procured a knife from a desk drawer, a futile instrument against trained operatives but superior to being defenseless. A knock. Ms. Bennett. It is Jenkins. Mr. Voss sent me. Jenkins, Adrian's chief of security, the individual who had shielded her in the garage. But the vocal tone was incongruous, too high-pitched, too hesitant. Verify your identity. Ma'am, our time is limited. Provide proof, or I will not open this door. Silence. Then, Mr. Voss instructed me to tell you the first time he met you. You appeared as someone who had forgotten they were meant to be alive. The statement landed with somatic force. Adrian had spoken those exact words. He had said them the night he articulated his reasons for assisting her. She disengaged the lock. The man on the other side was not Jenkins. He was younger, with a harder demeanor, and he was armed. Arya attempted to slam the door, but her reaction time was insufficient. He blocked it, forcing entry. Do not vocalize. Do not resist. This procedure does not have to be painful. She brandished the knife. An uncontrolled, desperate motion. He parried it with ease, torquing her arm until the weapon fell. I said, "Do not resist." "Who are you?" "An agent hired to neutralize a problem." He produced plastic restraints. "We are taking a walk. Quietly, calmly. You create a disturbance. I execute everyone in the kitchen downstairs. Is that understood?" Arya's mind processed the variables. A cry for help results in Sarah's death. Resistance results in mass casualties. Compliance offers a potential window for Adrian's intervention. I understand. Good. Hands behind your back? She complied, feeling the plastic constrict her wrists. He steered her toward the rear stairway, the service egress, away from the kitchen, away from potential witnesses. This was the point of catastrophic failure for her plan, the moment she became another statistic in a conflict she had started. They arrived at the alley exit. He pushed it open to find Adrian standing there with 6 armed operatives, all weapons aimed at them. Release her. Adrian's voice was devoid of emotion. Now. The man holding Arya froze, assessing his options. His firearm was pressed to her spine. I walk away or she dies. You will die in either scenario. The variable is whether you take her with you. You're bluffing. Test my resolve. Adriana's expression was absolute. You have 3 seconds. Release her or discover the consequences of threatening my asset. The man's grip intensified, then relaxed. He propelled Arya forward. She fell into Adrian's arms. Run, Adrian commanded the man, and inform your employer that next time there will be no warning. The man fled. Adrian's team allowed his escape. Why? Arya began. Because his fear is more valuable than his death. He will report back, confirm their plan failed, induce panic in their ranks. Adrian severed her zip ties with the knife. Are you injured? No. Agitated, but not injured. Good, because we are departing now. He led her to a waiting vehicle. They were in motion before she could cognitively process the event. How did you know? She asked. Because I have been monitoring their surveillance. I knew they had an asset inside the building. When you called, I synthesized the data. His jaw was clenched. That phone call you received? It was authentic. A former Titan operative, Marcus Chen. He has been a federal informant for months. He warned you because the operational timeline had advanced. They are not waiting for Daniel. No, they are acting now, which means we must act with greater speed. The vehicle entered a subterranean garage, a different structure, a different district. Adrian guided her to an elevator. It went down instead of up. Where are we? A secure facility, 3 levels below ground. Reinforced structure, multiple egress points. They cannot access you here. The elevator opened into what appeared to be a luxury subterranean shelter. Living area, kitchen, office facilities, all underground. How long must I remain here? Until we conclude this through one outcome or another. Adrian produced his phone. Maya is already present. My team retrieved her from the airport when the threat assessment was elevated. She must be traumatized. She is enraged but secure. Maya emerged from a bedroom, her expression a mix of fear and anger. What in the hell is happening? Arya embraced her. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Cease apologizing and begin explaining. So she did. She recounted everything, the strategy, the phone call, the assailant in her office. Maya listened, then struck Arya's shoulder forcefully. Ow. That is for being a fool. Using yourself as bait? Are you psychologically unstable? Probably. Definitely. Maya addressed Adrian. And you? You permitted this? I did not permit anything. She made a decision, an irrational choice. A necessary one, Arya corrected. These people killed our parents, Maya. They remain at large, causing harm. Someone must intervene. Someone. Not you specifically. Yes, me. Because I am the one with the evidence, the personal connection, the motivation. She met her sister's gaze. And if I do not complete what Mom and Dad initiated, who will? Maya's composure broke. I cannot lose you as well. You will not. I promise. You cannot make that promise. No, but I can promise I will fight with extreme prejudice to return. They embraced while Adrian operated his phone, making calls, coordinating logistics, planning the next phase. Finally, he disconnected and regarded them. Marcus Chen, the informant, just delivered complete documentation to the FBI. Names, contracts, financial data, every Titan operation for the last 10 years, your parents' case included. Arya's chest constricted. That is positive, correct? It is optimal. It means federal agents are currently converging on all known Titan locations. Arrests are in progress, so it is finished. Not yet. Titan's leadership remains at large. And they know their organization is imploding, which makes them desperate and highly dangerous. What are the implications for us? It means we remain here until the FBI confirms total containment. This could take hours or days. Maya collapsed onto the couch. This is pathological. This is justice, Adrienne corrected. Disordered, violent, unlike cinematic depictions. But justice all the same. His phone vibrated, he answered, listened, and his expression shifted. Understood. Maintain contact. He hung up and looked at Arya. They have him, the man from your office. He is in custody. And he is cooperating. Cooperating with what? Everything. The identity of his employer, their method of locating you, the entire network. Adrienne's smile was cold. He is surrendering Titan's command structure for immunity. By tomorrow, this will be concluded. Arya's legs lost strength. She sat next to Maya, her hands trembling. It is actually concluded. Not yet, but soon. Maya took her hand, squeezing it firmly, and Arya waited in a subterranean bunker with her sister and the man who facilitated her retaliation. Waited for the world above to cease its chaotic collapse. 3 hours later, Adrienne received the call. The FBI had 12 individuals in custody, including Titan's founder and the man who ordered her parents' assassinations. It was done. Arya stood as Adrienne relayed the news, went to the bathroom, closed the door, and finally allowed for a cathartic, emotional release for her parents. For the 5 years of believing their deaths were stochastic, for the grief she managed, believing justice was unattainable. She cried until her throat was abraded and her eyes burned, until she was emotionally depleted. Then she cleansed her face, corrected her posture, and re-entered the room to confront the next phase. Because this was not a conclusion, it was a beginning. When Arya returned to the main area, Maya and Adrienne were in a state of tense silence. Her sister looked up first. Are you functional? No, but I will be. Arya's voice was hoarse. What is the next step? Adrienne stood, securing his phone. Now, the FBI processes the detainees, constructs their case, and we prepare for the next stage, which is testimony. You will need to provide a complete account of your parents' investigation, their findings, and subsequent events. The prospect of recalling these details induced a visceral negative reaction, but she consented. When? Tomorrow. They aim to proceed rapidly before Titan's legal counsel can formulate defenses. He paused. There is another development. Daniel has been apprehended. Arya's respiration hitched. On what charge? Conspiracy. It appears he did more than merely contact Titan. He transferred funds, $50,000 for consultation services. Adrienne's expression was grim. The consultation pertained to making you disappear permanently. Maya's hand went to her mouth. He attempted to have you killed. He attempted to hire professional assassins. Whether they would have executed the contract is a matter of speculation, but the intent was established. Federal authorities possessed the wire transfers, communications, all requisite evidence. The subject, Arya, should have registered an emotional response, shock, a sense of betrayal, vindication. Instead, she manifested only exhaustion. The target, Daniel Cross, was neutralized. Facing 20 to 30 years incarceration, his familial support structure had already collapsed. The culinary industry had ostracized him. By the next cycle, his name would be a clinical example of greed overriding executive function. It was the outcome she had engineered. Total annihilation, a complete erasure. Yet, in the confines of a subterranean shelter following a failed abduction, the sensation was not of victory, but of a profound void. I require air, she articulated softly. A secure courtyard exists one level above. Adrienne indicated toward the lift. I will provide an escort. The courtyard was compact, yet exposed to the sky, featuring organic flora and sunlight diffused through reinforced glazing. A microcosm of normalcy amid pervasive paranoia. Arya assumed a seated position, angling her face toward the light. Adrian sat adjacent. He prompted her to articulate the cause of her displaying the demeanor of loss rather than triumph. Her laughter was a bitter, involuntary vocalization. "Is this winning?" she questioned. He countered, "You have exposed the agents responsible for your parents' deaths, neutralized the individual who usurped your life's work, and reclaimed your establishment and future. This clinically defines success." She then posited, "Why then do I feel this emptiness?" Adrienne paused in observation. "Because retributive justice does not fill the voids left by trauma. It only contains them." Her reply, "You've stated that previously." His response, "The statement remains valid. Eradicating one's antagonists does not restore what was taken. It merely prevents further loss." Arya occluded her eyes, registering the solar warmth. "My parents remain deceased. 5 years of my existence are irretrievable. No measure of justice alters this fact." "No," he conceded. His hand made contact with hers. "But it validates the significance of their deaths. They perished investigating systemic corruption. You have completed their work. That is not a null outcome. It feels like one. The sensation is temporary. You are in a state of acute stress response, processing adrenaline, fear, and rage. Soon you will awaken to the realization of your autonomy, true freedom. No individual holds power over you any longer." She exhibited a desire to internalize this concept, to trust the emotional vacuum would recede. Yet 3 years of conditioning had taught her that hope was a psychological liability, that positive outcome dependency leads to distress. What if I lack the functional capacity for freedom? What if prolonged survival mode has erased my ability to truly live? Adrienne repositioned her to establish direct eye contact. His gaze was clinical. "Then you relearn, sequentially. One day, one decision at a time. Tomorrow you will cook. Not for validation, not for conflict, but for the inherent gratification it provides. You will repeat this action until the obsessions with Daniel and Titan dissipate. You will simply be living, creating, building a new structure of meaning." You present it as a simple process. It is not. It is the most difficult psychological task you will undertake. Relinquishing the anger, the retributive impulse, the hypervigilance. He paused. "But your resilience is sufficient. I have observed it." A tightening in Arya's throat was noted. "What of you? What is your prognosis when this conflict ceases?" His smile was melancholic. "Honestly, the outcome is unknown. I have spent 2 years fixated on avenging my brother. My projections do not extend beyond that event. Perhaps they should. Perhaps ours both should." He rose, assisting her to her feet. "First, however, we conclude this operation. Tomorrow you provide your statement. The FBI solidifies its case, and we ensure all culpable parties are held accountable. And afterward, we determine our identities outside the context of a fight for survival." They returned inside. The subject's sister, Maya, was engaged in rapid digital communication. "Is everything stable?" Arya inquired. "Informing my employer of another emergency leave. Maya reported, looking up. Her response is accommodating, which is fortunate, as I'm not departing until this concludes. Maya, do not. I have already experienced parental loss. I will not lose you. I am remaining. Accept it. Arya initiated a hug. Thank you. You can express gratitude by ceasing to use yourself as tactical bait. My cardiac system cannot sustain it. Agreed. Adrian's mobile device activated. He moved away to respond. Upon his return, his expression was deliberately neutral. That was the FBI. They wish to advance your testimony to this evening. The rationale? Titan's legal counsel is already deploying countermeasures, filing motions attempting to suppress evidence, claiming unlawful surveillance, standard defensive tactics. The sooner your statement is officially recorded, the less viable their efforts become. A visceral response was observed in Arya's abdomen. Tonight, as in immediately? Within the hour, agents are en route. I am not prepared. You are. You have been prepared for 5 years, though the realization was latent. Adrian's tone was stable. Relay everything, your parents, their inquiry, the post-mortem events. Omit nothing. What if my recollection is flawed? What if I err? Then you state that you do not recall. The FBI does not demand perfect memory, only veracity. He touched her shoulder. You possess the capacity for this. Maya stood. I will be present during the interview. That is not required. I am staying. They were my parents as well. I have a right to the full account of their fate. 30 minutes later, 2 federal agents arrived, a female, Sarah Chen, and a male, Robert Martinez. Their demeanor was professional, even affable, but underscored by a clear resolve. Miss Bennett, thank you for consenting to this, Chen stated. We understand this is difficult. We will endeavor to be efficient. They convened in the bunker's common area. Chen activated a recording device, while Martinez prepared a notepad. Here, proceed when you are ready, Chen said with a measured tone. Arya inhaled. Where is the desired starting point? Your parents. Describe their establishment and their investigation. And so she began. She described the modest restaurant they had operated, their detection of financial anomalies, funds appearing without cause, deposits from unrecognized accounts. Initially, it was dismissed as an accounting error. But my father, she noted, was meticulous. He initiated a deeper probe and discovered the restaurant was being used as a conduit for laundering money. Small, distributed amounts designed to evade notice. Did they identify the source? Martinez inquired. They located a name, Marcus Vance, and an entity, Donovan Group. They intended to report it, having compiled evidence, financial records, transaction proofs. What was the subsequent event? They died, a vehicular incident. The police report cited loss of control on a wet surface. But my father was an exceptionally cautious driver, and the precipitation had been minimal. Chen leaned forward. Did you suspect foul play? I resisted the hypothesis. I wanted to attribute it to chance. But there were inconsistencies. The investigator concluded the case with undue haste, giving the evidence only a cursory review. My attempts to press for a more thorough inquiry were obstructed. Were there any threats? Not explicit, but the message was clear: cease inquiries or suffer consequences. And Daniel Cross's role in this? Arya's hands clenched involuntarily. We were partnered when my parents died. He was initially supportive, guiding me through the grief. urging me to focus on building Ember. But in retrospect, I believe it was a diversionary tactic. He consistently discouraged any mention of re-examining the accident. She paused. I perceived it as protection. I now see it as self-preservation. Martinez made a notation. What data supports that conclusion? 1 year after their deaths, Daniel acquired new investors linked to Donovan Group, individuals who pushed for aggressive expansion of Ember. When I questioned the capital's origin, he terminated our engagement and seized control of the restaurant. You theorize a connection between this capital and your parents' deaths. My hypothesis is that Daniel entered into an agreement. He received funding. They acquired a legitimate enterprise for their money laundering operation. I with the remaining variable they could not control. Agents Chen and Martinez exchanged a look. That is a severe allegation, Chen stated carefully. Do you possess corroborating evidence? No, only a pattern of coincidences that form a larger construct. But Adrian does. His investigators unearthed the connections, the financial trails linking Daniel's investors to Marcus Vance and Titan Security. We will require access to those records. They will be provided. Adrian has already compiled the full dossier. The interview proceeded for another hour, covering the gala, Adrian's role, the threats, and the abduction attempt. Upon conclusion, Arya appeared emotionally and psychologically depleted. Chen closed her notepad. Thank you, Miss Bennett. This is precisely what we required. Will it be sufficient for a conviction? Combined with Marcus Vance's testimony and the financial data, yes, we have a formidable case, multiple counts of money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and racketeering. She paused. Your parents' preliminary investigation was the catalyst for this entire operation. Absent their preliminary findings, the full extent of Titan's network might have remained undiscovered. A release of prolonged tension occurred within Arya's psyche. Their deaths were not without purpose. Indeed, they were not. They perished in an attempt to expose systemic corruption, and you have completed their objective. The outcome is significant. Following the agent's departure, Arya remained in a state of silent contemplation. Mia exhibited quiet vocalizations of grief. Adrian maintained a distance near the window, allowing for personal space. I wish they could witness this, Maya articulated at last. Wish they were aware justice was secured for them. Perhaps they are. Arya initiated physical contact to comfort her sister. Perhaps on some plane, they know we did not capitulate, that our efforts persisted. Your efforts persisted. My response was to retreat to Seattle and attempt memory suppression. You engaged in survival behavior that is not insignificant. They held one another as the psychological weight of 5 years began to dissipate. Adrian's mobile device vibrated. He examined it, then directed his gaze at them. The FBI has released a public statement confirming the arrests and outlining the investigation. Your parents are referenced by name as the investigators who initially exposed Titan's financial laundering scheme. He presented the device's screen. The headline stated, Vast criminal enterprise dismantled following a 5-year investigation initiated by murdered restaurateurs. Arya processed the text twice. Her parents were finally receiving acknowledgement for their actions, finally being memorialized as agents of justice rather than as victims. They are going to achieve renown, Maya stated softly. They are going to be remembered, Arya corrected, for choosing the ethical course of action, despite the ultimate personal cost. Her own device began to vibrate, a flood of incoming messages, communications from friends unmet in years, former colleagues, and even unknown individuals, all expressing congratulations, gratitude, and labeling her as courageous. She deactivated her phone. I have no desire for the label of brave. I simply desire closure. Adrienne moved toward her. You have it. After tomorrow's legal proceedings, you will not need to engage with this matter again. The FBI possesses the required evidence. The case proceeds without your involvement. An Ember is scheduled to open next week. You will cook, design your menu, and manifest the restaurant you envisioned. He paused. Unless you require a delay to process these events. No, I want to open. I want to proceed. I want to demonstrate my capacity to build something of beauty after this ordeal. Then that is the course of action we will take. Maya rose to her feet. I am retiring for the evening. My cognitive capacity is at its limit for today. She embraced Arya, then moved toward one of the bedrooms, leaving Arya in Adrian's company. You should also rest, he stated quietly. I am not fatigued, merely in a state of hyper-arousal. My mind will not cease its activity. Do you wish to verbalize it? Not particularly. I just want to experience normalcy for 5 minutes. I want to forget that individuals attempted to terminate my life, that my former fiancé is incarcerated, and that my entire existence has been dominated by violence and retribution. Adrienne considered this, then walked to the kitchen area and began to retrieve ingredients. What is your objective? Inducing a state of forgetting for 5 minutes. He located eggs, butter, and bread. When did you last consume something that was not a survival ration? This morning, perhaps? I have no clear recollection. Then be seated. Permit me to provide you with sustenance. The situation was surreal. Adrian Voss, billionaire and strategist of complex revenge scenarios, was preparing scrambled eggs for her in a subterranean shelter. Yet she sat and observed his actions. His movements were efficient, but lacked practice, the profile of one who possesses cooking knowledge but rarely applies it. Where did you acquire this skill? She inquired. My brother, he was the designated chef in our family. He used to prepare breakfast every Sunday. Eggs, toast, and inferior coffee, he claimed, was gourmet. Adrian's tone softened. I have not prepared this since his death. You are not obligated to eat. I want to. It is time I focused on positive memories instead of exclusively mourning my loss. He transferred the eggs to a plate. They were slightly overcoagulated, but palatable. The toast was correctly prepared. Arya took a bite. The taste was one of comfort, of normalcy, of something other than persistent fear. This is good. It is adequate. Do not engage in placation. She laughed. An actual laugh. Fine. It is adequate, but it is appreciated nonetheless. They consumed the meal in a comfortable silence. There was no discussion of FBI investigations or criminal proceedings. Merely the act of eating, quiet, and the peculiar peace derived from surviving another day. When they concluded, Adrienne removed the plates. An improvement? Yes, actually. Yes. She felt a reduction in her psychological burden, less as if she were overwhelmed. He sat next to her on the couch. Ask me. Ask you what? The question you have wished to pose since the gala. Arya's heart rate accelerated. You told me to wait until this was concluded. It is concluded. The arrests have been made. The case has been established. We are merely awaiting the judicial system to finalize our efforts. His gray eyes met hers. So, ask me, was it authentic? The kiss and all that followed? Or was I merely an instrument for your objective? Adrian did not avert his gaze. Both. The candor was painful. explain. Initially, you were an instrument, a vector to access Daniel and, through him, Marcus Vance, a means to an end. He paused. But at some point between the gala and the present, you transcended that role. You became someone for whom I developed a genuine effective response, rather than just an asset I was manipulating. When you entered that investor meeting, when you stood there and conveyed the truth despite your evident terror, when you chose confrontation over concealment. He reached for her hand. You served as a reminder that strength is not the absence of fear. It is the capacity to act despite it. That is a sophisticated way of stating you manipulated me and developed an attachment. Yes, essentially. His smile was wry. I lack proficiency in this, in being transparent about my desires instead of simply seizing them, but I am attempting to improve. What is it that you desire? In all honesty, I want to observe the trajectory of this. I want to ascertain if our connection is authentic or merely a trauma bond. I want to construct something not predicated on revenge or justice. He squeezed her hand, but only if that is your desire as well. Arya observed their joined hands, reflecting on all they had endured, the danger, the manipulation, the calculated risks, and beneath it, the moments of authentic connection. The way he had advocated for her, believed in her, and helped her reclaim her identity. I desire that as well, but I require you to promise one thing. What? No more information withheld. No more strategies executed without my knowledge. If we engage in this, we do so as equals, as partners, not as a manipulator and a useful object. Agreed. No more secrets. He drew her closer. Anything further? Yes. If you ever attempt to use me as bait again without my prior consent, I will administer a slow-acting and painful poison to your food. Adrienne laughed. The sound was genuine. Noted. No unauthorized bait scenarios. Good. He kissed her with a slow, soft pressure, entirely unlike the calculated display at the gala. This was authentic, complex, human. When they separated, Arya rested her forehead on his. This is likely a highly inadvisable course of action. Definitely. We are both dysfunctional individuals, traumatized, dysfunctional individuals with attachment issues and a shared proclivity for elaborate retaliatory schemes. His smile was warm, but perhaps that is what allows it to function. We understand one another, the darkness, the need for justice, all of it. Or perhaps we are both too psychologically damaged to recognize a healthy dynamic. That is also a possibility. He moved a strand of hair behind her ear. There is only one method to determine the outcome. We attempt it. We fail. We attempt it again, precisely. Arya's phone vibrated. She had reactivated it reflexively. A message from Jennifer Walsh, the critic for The Times. An article concerning your parents has been published. You should read it. She accessed the link. The headline caused an involuntary pause in her breathing. The couple who died fighting corruption. How Helen and Robert Bennett's investigation led to the downfall of a criminal empire. The article documented everything. Her parents' restaurant, their investigation, the evidence they collected, and how their deaths were ruled an accident until their daughter refused to accept that conclusion. It depicted them as heroes, ordinary citizens who confronted extraordinary malevolence and incurred the ultimate cost. They are narrating their story, Arya said softly. Finally, Adrienne read over her shoulder. They are deserving of this memory. I wish they were present to witness it. They are in you, in all you have constructed, in your refusal to tolerate injustice. He held her close. You are their legacy, Arya. Living evidence that the cause for which they fought was significant. She permitted herself to cry once more, but this time the emotion was not grief. It was catharsis. The psychological burden of 5 years was finally lifting. Her parents were deceased. That was irreversible. But their deaths were not without meaning. They had not been forgotten. And the perpetrators were facing legal consequences. That had to be sufficient. Maya materialized in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. I am unable to sleep. An excess of adrenaline. You have joined the group, Arya said. Her sister sat on the opposite side of the couch. I read the article about Mom and Dad, as did I. It is strange to see their names in wide circulation, to see them identified as heroes. They were heroes. We simply failed to recognize it until now. Maya produced her phone, displaying the screen to Arya. Individuals are establishing a memorial fund in their names to assist other small business owners in combating corruption. Arya read the donation page. In 3 hours, it had accumulated over $200,000. They are having an impact even now. Yes, they are. Maya wiped her eyes. I feel pride for them, and I feel pride for you, for completing their work. I could not have accomplished it in isolation. But you did accomplish it. That is the crucial point. They sat together. 3 individuals who had survived against the odds, who had resisted when it seemed futile, who had converted grief and rage into something of actual consequence. Adrienne's phone buzzed. He checked it, then stood. The FBI has just confirmed all arraignments are scheduled for tomorrow morning. Titan's leadership, Marcus Vance, Daniel, and all affiliates of the organization. Full indictments, no plea agreements. It is truly occurring. It is truly occurring. He looked at Arya. Do you wish to be present for the arraignments? Am I required to testify? No. Solely to observe. Subject Arya exhibits a fixation on witnessing the perpetrators restrained and subjected to legal repercussions. Her ideations centered on Daniel and the anonymous agents of her parents' demise. This compulsion extends to all figures who demonstrated a belief in their own impunity. Her stated desire is to be present for their downfall. Adrienne affirms this need for collective witness, framing it as front row seats to justice. The sister, Maya, reinforces this by invoking parental approval, providing a familial mandate to see the process to its conclusion. Thus, a unified plan was established within their secure environment for the following day's events, where the architects of their trauma would finally be held accountable. For the first time in 5 years, the subject, Arya, displayed an emotional state beyond persistent grief or rage. This new affect is classified as hope, a condition she perceives as dangerous, fragile, and terrifying. Nevertheless, its presence is undeniable, predicated on the imminent judicial hearing for her parents' killers. The subsequent phase involves her reclaiming the Ember property, followed by the reconstruction of a life narrative. This is not a repression of trauma, but an integration of it. Survival is no longer a sufficient psychological state. She now demonstrates a will to thrive, a newfound belief in her own capacity for recovery. Upon arrival, the courthouse environment was saturated with media personnel, creating a barrier of auditory and visual stimuli. Adriana's security detail established a necessary perimeter. The subject's sister, Maya, displayed a strong somatic stress response, gripping Arya's hand to the point of pain. Are you prepared for this? Adriana inquired with controlled tone. Arya's gaze fixed on the institution, a symbol of a justice system she had emotionally divested from 5 years prior. No, she stated, but proceeding regardless. As they navigated the throng, inquiries were directed at them with accusatory undertones. Miss Bennett, what is your emotional response to your ex-fiancé's arrest? Is there validity to claims you engineered this investigation? Do you accept responsibility for the fatalities linked to Titan security? This final stimulus provoked a reaction. She paused, turned, and confronted the reporter. The only parties responsible for those deaths are those who gave the orders. Her vocal delivery was stable and detached. I did not cause this. I merely refuse to allow it to remain concealed. Adriana intervened with a guiding touch, preventing further disclosure. The courthouse interior presented a quieter, more oppressive atmosphere, with architecture designed to convey institutional power. Agent Chen awaited them. Miss Bennett, Miss Maya, Mr. Voss, he began. Arraignments commence in 20 minutes. Courtroom 3. I have secured seating. Arya inquired if all involved would be present. Everyone connected to Titan currently in custody, Chen confirmed. 16 defendants, including Marcus Vance, Daniel Cross, and Thomas Reeves. No, Arya registered a lack of recognition for the final name. Who is Thomas Reeves? Titan's founder, Chen clarified, the architect of the entire network, and the individual who personally sanctioned the termination of your parents. The name acted as a psychological impact, a concrete identity for a previously abstract trauma source. For 5 years, the perpetrator had been a formless entity. He now possessed a name, an identity, a specific target for her accumulated rage. I need to see him, she declared. Chen showed momentary resistance. The defendants will enter separately. You will observe them all during the hearing. No, she countered. I require a confrontation with Thomas Reeves before the arraignment. He must be made aware of my identity. Miss Bennett, that violates standard procedure. Procedure is irrelevant to me, she retorted. These individuals murdered my parents, attempted to murder me, and deconstructed my life. I have earned the right to face them before a judge determines their legal fate. Adrian intervened. Facilitate it! 5 minutes! Supervised, no contact. Chen assessed the situation and conceded. 5 minutes, but there is no physical contact. You will not issue threats. And if his counsel objects, the interaction is terminated instantly. Understood. Chen led them through a network of corridors to a restricted area containing holding cells for defendants. Each door was manned by an armed guard. He paused at room 7. He is inside, restrained, his lawyers with him. Your 5 minutes begin now. She actuated the door. Thomas Reeves appeared to be in his 60s, with silver hair and a high-end suit, projecting an image of distinction rather than menace. This was a man capable of ordering assassinations over a meal and experiencing no subsequent sleep disturbance. His gaze met theirs upon entry. It was affectless, analytical, showing neither remorse nor fear, only a clinical evaluation. Arya Bennett, he stated. His vocal tone was modulated and refined. I had anticipated your appearance before this proceeding began. You are aware of my identity. Naturally, you are the daughter of Helen and Robert Bennett, the one who demonstrated an inability to disengage, who felt compelled to investigate until a total system collapse occurred. The dispassionate manner in which he uttered her parents' names triggered a visceral rage response in Arya. "You murdered them." I neutralized a threat, a critical distinction. He reclined as if in a casual social engagement rather than a custodial confrontation. "Your parents were examining financial discrepancies. Their findings jeopardized my clients. I could not permit that information to become public. So you killed them." I resolved a problem with cleanliness and efficiency, as I have resolved hundreds of similar problems. He smiled. Had they exhibited greater intelligence, they would have heeded the warning and ceased their inquiries. They did not, and a consequence was administered. The sister, Maya, exhibited a sudden loss of impulse control, lunging forward. Adrian intercepted her. "You son of a—" "Easy," Adrian murmured. "He is provoking a reaction. Do not provide it." Reeves appeared clinically amused. "The younger daughter, Maya, I presume, a college student at the time. You were absent from the funeral, were you not? Too preoccupied with your own affairs to note your parents' deaths." "Shut your mouth," Maya vocalized with hostility. "The alternative being an assault. Please proceed. It would provide my attorney with grounds to file a harassment claim and contaminate the entire case." Arya positioned herself as a barrier between her sister and Reeves, consciously regulating her own emotional state. "You believe you are intelligent," she began, "that you have achieved a victory through systemic manipulation, but you have already incurred a total loss. Your network is dismantled. Your financial assets are frozen. In approximately 15 minutes, you will stand before a judge to hear charges that will ensure your lifelong incarceration." "Perhaps," he countered, "or perhaps my legal team will identify procedural flaws. Perhaps key evidence will be ruled inadmissible. Perhaps I will be exonerated, and your efforts will have resulted in nothing more than making yourself a target." He leaned forward. "Even from within a penal institution, Ms. Bennett, my influence persists. I have resources and individuals indebted to me. You should consider that before you engage in premature celebration." "Is that a threat?" she asked. "It is a statement of fact. I have constructed an empire over 40 years. Do you imagine a few arrests can nullify that? The organization persists. New leadership, new protocols, and you—" He smiled. "You remain merely a chef who experienced a fortunate outcome, who inadvertently uncovered something far beyond her cognitive grasp." Adrian stepped forward, his voice devoid of warmth. "Permit me to present another fact, Reeves. All your communications from this location are under surveillance. Every threat is logged. Every word you just uttered will be used as evidence against you." He displayed his phone, showing an active recording application. "Thank you for the confession. The district attorney will appreciate it." Reeves's smile showed a minor but perceptible faltering. "That is inadmissible in court. Illegally recorded." "Perfectly legal," Adrian corrected. "You were apprised of your right to silence and elected to speak. Furthermore, Miss Bennett is a victim in an ongoing investigation. Recording threats made against her is not only legal, it is recommended." The lawyer beside Reeves finally intervened. "This interaction is concluded. Do not speak further." The admission, however, had been made. Reeves had confirmed his culpability, the network's structure, and the continuing threat, all documented. Arya observed the man responsible for her parents' deaths and experienced only clinical contempt. You are correct on a single point. I am just a chef. I lack comprehension of your world, which is predicated on violence, corruption, and murder for financial gain. Well, but I comprehend something you do not. And what is that? That all individuals are eventually held accountable for their actions. The timing may not be immediate, nor the method expected, but justice is an inevitable outcome. She turned to exit. Enjoy the remainder of your life in confinement, Mr. Reeves. May each day feel like an eternity. They left him in the room, restrained, enraged, and finally without power. In the corridor, Maya was experiencing tremors. I had the impulse to kill him, a genuine homicidal urge. I know, I experienced it as well. Arya embraced her sister. But he is not worth the expenditure, not worth sacrificing our own lives for 5 minutes of catharsis. He exhibits no remorse, no guilt. Individuals with his pathology never do. It is the defining characteristic of their monstrosity. Adrian's tone was grim, but he will be held accountable regardless of his affective state. They proceeded to the courtroom and occupied their assigned seats. The gallery gradually filled with press, other victims, family members, and law enforcement. The defendants were then escorted in individually, all in handcuffs and orange jumpsuits, the uniform of the accused. Marcus Vance appeared physically smaller than in photographs, his status diminished without the trappings of wealth and authority. Daniel was among the last to enter. He showed signs of weight loss and neglect. When his gaze met Arya's, she identified fear, animosity, and the dawning comprehension of a catastrophic miscalculation. She maintained eye contact, ensuring he registered her lack of fear. She was no longer the subject he had discarded and psychologically broken. She was the agent who had dismantled an empire to reveal the truth. Finally, Thomas Reeves was brought in, his arrogant composure largely intact, yet unable to fully mask the reality of his circumstances. The judge entered. The court rose, then was seated. The formal proceedings commenced with the reading of the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, racketeering, wire fraud. The list was extensive. Each defendant entered a plea of not guilty. All were remanded to custody to await trial. Bail was denied due to an elevated flight risk. After the conclusion, Arya remained seated, observing them as they were led away. Observing the perpetrators of her familial trauma secured behind steel doors failed to elicit the expected catharsis. The event registered merely as a point of finality. Outside, the subject, Arya, was met with media elements. This time, she initiated the interaction, approaching the microphones to make a prepared statement. She identified herself as Arya Bennett. 5 years prior, her parents were terminated while investigating systemic corruption. For 3 years, she operated under the belief that justice was unattainable for the powerful. She paused, then corrected her previous assessment. I was wrong. The individuals responsible for my parents' deaths are now in custody. She noted they face charges ensuring lifelong incarceration, achieved only through a refusal to concede. The subject disregarded auditory stimuli from reporters, maintaining her narrative. For any individual who has experienced loss due to violence or systemic malfeasance, she advised against resignation. Maintained the pursuit. Maintained the demand for information, as truth is an eventual emergent property. When it surfaces, even the most powerful structures collapse. She then ceded the form to Agent Chen and retreated. Adrienne was present by the vehicle. The assessment of her statement was positive. The subject affirmed its veracity. She got into the vehicle, stating a need to go to Ember to engage in cooking, a regulatory activity. The kitchen presented as she had last observed it. Her subordinate, Sarah, expressed surprise at her presence. "I know, but the need to be here was significant, to perform a routine task." Arya donned her professional attire. "What is the current focus?" she inquired. "We are testing the new tasting menu, seeking to finalize it pre-reopening." "Excellent. Present the current state." They engaged in culinary work for several hours. The subject exhibited a state of flow, absorbed in the procedural rhythm of the work, the precision of cuts, the chemistry of elements. This state represented the objective for which she had struggled. Not retribution, but the simple creative act. Her sister Maya arrived near sunset, noting the subject had been present for 6 hours. The subject expressed surprise at the passage of time, a common feature of a flow state. "Do not apologize. I'm glad you're engaging in this activity instead of ruminating on external events." Maya sampled a sauce the subject was reducing. An inquiry was made as to its composition: miso caramel with black pepper for the pork. The subject identified it as a familial recipe, her grandmother's with modifications. She disclosed that her mother prepared it on Sundays and that she had not replicated it since the traumatic event. The reason cited was the painful association and the reminder of her loss. Stirring the sauce, she articulated a cognitive shift that occurred in the courtroom. "They took my parents, but the memories, the recipes, the affection invested in each dish remain. Those are still my own. Yes, they are." Arya plated the dish. Applying the sauce and garnishes, she prompted Maya to test it. The subject's sister consumed a portion, closing her eyes in a sensory response. She described the taste as evocative of home, of family, a pre-trauma state of normalcy. That is the intended purpose of Ember. Not merely an eatery, but a locus for connection, memory, and affection in culinary form. Adrian appeared, reporting that the reservation system had experienced a catastrophic failure due to excessive traffic. "Following your courthouse statement, demand for a reservation on opening night is overwhelming." He displayed his mobile device. "We are fully booked for the next 3 months pre-opening." The subject processed the data, labeling it insane. "This is a measure of success. There is a public desire to offer support, to participate in your narrative." He sampled the pork. "And if the food is of this quality, patronage will continue beyond the initial publicity." Sarah then appeared with other staff, stating a need to address staffing deficiencies. "If bookings are at this level, we require an increase in all personnel." For the subsequent 2 hours, they engaged in logistical planning. The subject experienced physical and mental fatigue but reported feeling alive, a shift from a mere survival state. Adrian transported her back to his residence. The secure location was no longer required. The leadership of the Titan organization was incarcerated. Direct threats had ceased, yet the subject had remained at Adrian's penthouse. The environment was perceived as safer, more familiar, conducive to rest. Maya was present, having procured takeout. "I ordered Thai. I hope that is acceptable." "Perfect." Arya assumed a resting position beside her, stating she was too fatigued for further cooking. They consumed the meal in silence, a demonstration of familial comfort. Maya's phone signaled a message. Upon reading it, she smiled. The memorial fund reached $500,000. The funds will establish a grant program to provide small business owners with legal aid against fraud. Our parents would have approved of that. Yes, they would have strongly approved. Maya set down her device. She then inquired about the subject's psychological state. I do not know. Reevaluate in 1 year. Arya manipulated her food. At present, I am attempting to process the sequence of events. The arrests, the arraignments, the fact that a positive outcome was achieved. We did achieve it, correct? I believe so. But the effective response is not what I anticipated. It does not feel like closure or peace, as depicted in fiction. What is the sensation? It is like the ability to breathe has been restored, like the burden of their deaths is no longer carried, like I can construct a life instead of merely surviving one. She looked at her sister. Is that sufficient? I believe that is everything. Adrian appeared with wine. To survival, to justice, and to future developments. They drank. The wine was of high quality and served as a symbol of victory and new phases. What is your plan now? Arya asked Maya. I will return to Seattle eventually, but I will remain through the opening. I wish to observe your success. Maya smiled. Also, having a celebrity chef as a sister enhances my social capital. I am not a celebrity. You're featured the cover of 3 magazines this week. That is the definition of a celebrity. This was factually correct. The media had seized upon her narrative. However, the subject remained indifferent to the coverage, fame, or recognition. Her primary drive was to cook, to construct something meaningful, to demonstrate that one can survive trauma and still produce beauty. The week preceding Ember's reopening was a period of intense preparation and media interviews, which the subject performed at her publicist's insistence. Primarily, however, she cooked, developing dishes that served as narratives honoring her family. The night before opening, she stood in the empty establishment, a space she had conceptualized, lost, and reclaimed. Adrian located her there. Experiencing doubt? No, just processing this moment. The quiet before the operational phase. It will be remarkable. You are aware of that, correct? I am confident in the quality of the food. For everything else, she gestured noncommittally. We will see. He drew her into an embrace. You have already prevailed, Arya. The rest is ancillary. Since when did you adopt optimism? Since I encountered someone who demonstrated that fighting for something is occasionally effective. He kissed her forehead. Obtain some rest. Tomorrow is a significant day. However, the subject could not sleep. She remained awake, contemplating her parents and the trajectory from grief to justice. At approximately 3 a.m., she abandoned the attempt at sleep and proceeded to the kitchen, initiating prep work hours ahead of schedule. Sarah found her at 5. You also could not sleep. Correct. Too much stimulation. Do you require assistance? Always. They worked in tandem as the sun rose, preparing ingredients and verifying logistics. By the time other staff arrived, all was in readiness. At 5 p.m., the first patrons were admitted. Jennifer Walsh of The Times was present, along with critics from all major publications. The dining room reached capacity, orders commenced, and Arya began to cook. She entered a state of complete immersion, directing orders and ensuring every plate met her standard of perfection. This was her innate function, not combating criminals, but creating experiences and providing satisfaction through her craft. Midway through the service, Sarah approached her. Table 12 wishes to convey their compliments. They said the Korean short rib induced an emotional response. Good tears, the optimal kind. An order for the full 6-course tasting menu arrived. Arya and her team executed it without error. Each course was a narrative, each flavor a memory. When service concluded, she was depleted, perspiring, and stained with sauces, yet happier than she had been in 5 years. Adrienne was waiting with Maya and champagne. "How was our performance?" Arya inquired. "Observe for yourself." He showed her his phone. Social media platforms were inundated with images and positive commentary. Jennifer Walsh had posted a preliminary assessment of her review. Ember is not just a restaurant, it is a resurrection. Arya Bennett has processed her pain and transformed it into a transcendent experience. This is food that affirms the value of being alive. Arya read the text twice. She wrote that. She had that experience because that is your function. You induce affective states in people through your cooking. Sarah appeared with the staff. "Boss, we have a tradition. A toast after the first successful service. Are you participating?" "Absolutely." They convened in the kitchen, the entire team that made the night possible. Arya raised her glass. To collaboration, to high standards, and to demonstrating that positive outcomes can arise from terrible circumstances. Subject Arya expressed gratitude to her cohort, reinforcing their collective purpose. They engaged in a celebratory ritual. Positioned at the center of her team, she experienced a resurgence of earned pride, a psychological state long suppressed by trauma. The emotion was not narcissistic but derived from tangible achievement. After the team dispersed, she remained with associates Adrienne and Mia. Maya vocalized disbelief at their success. Arya's rejoinder, "we," was a mild rebuke, noting Maya's role was confined to bar patronage. The justification offered was moral support and generous tipping. Shared laughter indicated group cohesion and a return to normalcy. A notification on Adrienne's phone prompted a notable shift in his demeanor. The legal disposition for Marcus Vance had been reached. Arya displayed a physiological startled response. The timeline was unexpectedly brief. He had accepted a plea agreement. Overwhelmed by the evidence, his legal team recommended cooperation. The plea involved admitting guilt on all counts to circumvent a death sentence. The term was life without parole. An identical outcome was noted for Thomas Reeves and most of Titan's senior members. His message indicated Daniel's trial was pending, though plea negotiations aimed for a 15 to 20-year sentence. The conflict had concluded. The individuals responsible for her parents' deaths were now permanently incarcerated. Daniel faced a total loss of liberty, social standing, and future prospects. Arya, conversely, had recovered her restaurant, her identity, and her life. Maya quietly inquired about her emotional state. Arya reported a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and sorrow at the high cost of resolution. Surveying the dining area, she voiced gratitude for their collective survival and successful resistance. Adrian raised his glass, proposing a toast to survival. Arya revised this to more than survival, articulating a cognitive shift toward living with purpose, constructing meaningful lives, and embracing hope despite overwhelming adversity. They drank to affirm this new framework. The ensuing weeks were marked by rapid success. Ember became the city's most exclusive reservation, garnering widespread critical praise. Competing chefs dined there and departed with renewed inspiration. Arya increased her staff, diversified the menu, and began strategizing a second establishment, though her core activity remained the act of cooking, a sublimation of her experiences shared with patrons. Maya returned to Seattle, but maintained monthly visits, consistently occupying the chef's counter and accepting Arya's recommendations. Adrian continued to expand his own enterprises, yet he allocated time for regular family dinners at Ember. His gaze toward Arya consistently reflected profound admiration. It is plausible they provided mutual therapeutic value. Both individuals, marked by significant trauma, demonstrated that recovery involves not erasure of the past, but constructing a new identity from the remaining fragments. 6 months post-opening, Arya stood at her parents' gravesite. She presented flowers, an ember menu, and a written communication detailing the recent events. "We secured them," she verbalized quietly. "All perpetrators are now facing consequences. Your investigation was the catalyst. The evidence you uncovered made this outcome possible." Environmental sounds included wind and birdsong. "I have achieved stability. I possess my business, my support system, and a partner who accepts my complex psychological history." A smile accompanied her tears. "You would appreciate Adrian. He exhibits manipulative, calculating, and ruthless traits, yet also displays a unique form of kindness. He was instrumental in helping me reconnect with my pre-trauma identity." She placed the menu on her mother's grave. "This is the product of your recipes, methods, and passion for food. Every creation is an homage to you. Each flavor profile contains your memory. Every patron at Ember experiences a part of your legacy." A hand on her shoulder indicated Adrian's presence. He had maintained a respectful distance by the vehicle. "Are you prepared?" he asked. "Yes, I believe I am." They returned to the car together. Arya glanced back one final time. For 5 years, their deaths had been a defining, burdensome element of her identity. In this moment, she had a cognitive breakthrough. Their lives, not their deaths, defined her. The values they imparted, their love, and their commitment to justice at any cost, that was her true inheritance. The legacy was not grief or rage, but a resilient belief that ethical individuals must contend for what is right, regardless of difficulty. She had fulfilled their mission and built an enterprise they would have endorsed. This realization provided profound psychological closure. Back at Ember, dinner service was commencing. The full dining room and the kitchen's organized activity demonstrated a high-functioning system. Sarah called orders. The cooks responded in unison. The operation moved with practiced efficiency. Arya donned her apron and assumed her position. It was her domain, her team. Her ambition actualized. "Heard?" she vocalized and began to cook. Her motivation was no longer vengeance, justice, or even memorializing her parents, but the intrinsic joy of the act itself. She found fulfillment in the art of transforming raw materials and in providing others with positive sensory experiences through her food. This was her present reality, defined not by her losses but by her acquisitions: strength, purpose, and fortitude to persist against impossible odds. Her starting point was a fractured individual using event planning as a facade, avoiding visibility and confrontation. She had evolved into a person who successfully confronted her trauma. She had constructed a new reality from the remnants of her old one, proving that psychological injury need not be a terminal diagnosis but can be a catalyst for growth. Adriana appeared at the kitchen entrance. He observed her without interruption, his expression one of profound appreciation. During a lull, she approached him. "What is it?" "Nothing. Simply admiring your creation." "Our creation," she corrected. "Partners, you recall?" "Equal partners," he conceded. "Although this domain is entirely yours. I manage the logistical and financial aspects, the necessary but mundane side." He drew her into an embrace, unconcerned that she was covered in kitchen detritus. "I am proud of you. I hope you know that." You've articulated it before. I will continue to articulate it daily if you permit it. She gave him a brief, affectionate kiss. Exit my kitchen. I have duties to perform. Yes, chef, he replied with a smile and departed. Arya returned to her station, to the controlled environment of a professional kitchen, to the labor that gave her a sense of completeness. Service proceeded without error. Every plate dispatched from the kitchen met a standard of perfection. Every patron departed satisfied. After the final table was cleared, Sarah initiated closing procedures. The staff cleaned and prepared for the next day. Arya stood in the center of it all, taking a moment to respire. This was the structure of her life now. This space, this team, this vocation she cherished, not as a reaction against her past, but as a result of it. She had been psychologically fractured and deconstructed by individuals who perceived her as weak. From that state, she had ascended and created something of beauty. She demonstrated that resilience is not merely survival, it is about thriving, selecting joy after profound suffering, and maintaining a belief in future improvement. That was the substantive victory. It was not the legal actions, the convictions, or the justice she pursued, but this. Standing in her own kitchen, engaged in meaningful work, supported by people who trusted her, living a life of consequence. She retrieved her phone and sent a text to Maya. Love you. Thank you for your unwavering support. The reply was immediate. Always. You are permanently a part of my life. A second text arrived from Adrian. Dinner at my residence tomorrow. I will cook. She smiled. Your culinary skills are subpar. They are adequate. Your own assessment? Fine, but I am supplying the wine. Agreed. She stored her phone and completed her closing tasks. The next day, the cycle would repeat. And the day following, she would continue expanding her enterprise, one flawless dish at a time. But for this evening, she permitted herself to feel the psychological release. The burden was lifting, the future was expanding, and the possibility existed that the most fulfilling phases of her life were yet to come. She secured Ember and emerged into the night. The city lights surrounded her, symbolizing vitality and potential. Elsewhere, the individuals who attempted to ruin her were confined to prison cells, facing the repercussions they thought they would evade. And she was here, autonomous, successful, and surrounded by a robust support network. This was a form of justice. It was not the idealized version from fiction, but it was real and earned. Hers. She had struggled for it, suffered for it, and endured against expectations. Now she was positioned to enjoy its fruits. She could build a life that honored her parents' memory without being pathologically defined by their deaths. She could engage in a reciprocal, loving relationship with a partner who understood her psychological complexities. She could create food that brought people pleasure and reminded them of life's value. That constituted her legacy. Not retribution or bitterness, but beauty and joy. It was a resolute conviction that good individuals are entitled to good lives. She had validated this belief through extreme hardship and a refusal to capitulate when that seemed the only logical course. And now she could embody that belief daily. That was sufficient. That was everything. Arya Bennett proceeded into the night with her head held high and a sense of profound emotional fulfillment, prepared for any future eventualities. She had, after all, already survived the worst possible circumstances. All that remained was the process of living,